The emerald corset. The air in the dressing room was thick with the scent of lavender water and the suffocating heat of a coal fire that had been banked too high. Outside, the February wind howled through the chimney pots of Mayfair, rattling the sash windows in their frames. But inside, Lady Isabel Montford was fighting a battle for her breath. "Just a little tighter, my lady," Sarah, her lady's maid, murmured, her knee pressed gently against the base of Isabel's spine. Isabel gripped the mahogany edge of her vanity table, her knuckles turning white. "I think that is quite enough, Sarah. I should like to be able to digest at least one course of Lady Redmond's dinner." "Her ladyship, your mother was quite specific," Sarah replied, apologetic but firm, giving the laces one final ruthless tug. "She wishes for the emerald silk to sit perfectly smooth, no creases." Isabel exhaled a sharp, shallow breath as the whalebone stays locked her ribcage into the fashionable, impossible silhouette of the 1815 season. She was no longer a woman of flesh and blood. She was a structure, an architectural marvel of silk and bone, designed for public consumption. When Sarah finally dropped the heavy emerald gown over Isabel's head, the weight of the fabric settled onto her shoulders like a sentence. She moved to the tall cheval mirror in the corner of the room. The woman staring back was undeniably beautiful. The deep green of the silk made her eyes flash with a dangerous brilliance, and her chestnut hair had been tortured into an elaborate cascade of curls, secured with pearl-tipped pins. Her skin was pale, her posture rigid. It was a perfect image. It was a perfect lie. Isabel touched the cold glass, tracing the line of her own jaw. Beneath the silk and the stays, her heart was beating a frantic rhythm, like a bird trapped in a chimney. Tonight was the Redmond dinner. Tonight, the walls of her life would close in just a little further. The carriage ride. The family carriage, emblazoned with the Hawkstone crest, rocked gently over the cobblestones as it navigated the fog-choked streets of London. The gas lamps flickered past the windows, blurring into streaks of sickly yellow light against the encroaching dark. Inside, the atmosphere was as stifling as the corset. Edmund Montford, the Earl of Hawkstone, sat opposite Isabel, his gloved hands resting on the silver head of his cane. He was a man of sharp angles and sharper expectations, his steel-grey hair perfectly coiffed, his expression one of perpetual, mild dissatisfaction. Beside him sat Isabel's mother, Margaret, the Countess, who was currently adjusting the sapphire bracelet at her wrist with practiced precision. "You are quiet tonight, Isabel," her mother observed, her voice cutting through the rhythmic clatter of the horses' hooves. "I hope you are not planning to carry a mood into the Redmonds' drawing room. Lady Redmond is particularly sensitive to atmosphere." "I am merely saving my conversation for the dinner table, Mamma," Isabel replied, turning her gaze from the damp grey streets to the velvet interior of the carriage. "I understand the guest list is extensive." "Extensive and exclusive," the Earl corrected, his voice a low rumble. "Redmond has managed to secure the attendance of half the cabinet, and if rumours are to be believed, a certain duke who has been scarce in society since the peace was declared. We must ensure we speak with Lord Redmond about the boundary dispute in Derbyshire," her mother added, her mind always calculating the social chessboard. She turned her sharp blue eyes onto her daughter. "And you, Isabel, must be particularly attentive to Lord Bramfield. He has gone to great lengths to secure a seat beside you tonight." Isabel felt a cold stone drop into her stomach. "Lord Bramfield is always attentive. He is devoted," the Countess corrected, "a quality you would do well to appreciate. There are many young ladies in this city who would trade their souls for the security Philip Bramfield offers." Security. The word hung in the carriage, heavy and lifeless. Isabel looked back out the window. She saw a street urchin running. Through the fog, his coat tattered, his feet lightly freezing, but he was running somewhere. He had a direction. She, conversely, was being carried forward on rails she had not laid, toward a destination she had not chosen. The grand arrival. The Redmond townhouse was not merely a home, it was a fortress of social dominance. As their carriage joined the queue of vehicles waiting to deposit their passengers, Isabel could see the house glowing like a beacon against the frost-silvered stones of the square. Every window was ablaze with the fire of 1,000 candles, casting long, dancing shadows onto the street below. The noise hit them the moment the footman opened the carriage door, a cacophony of iron wheels, shouting drivers, and the rustle of expensive fabrics. The winter air was biting, sharp enough to freeze the breath in one's lungs. But as Isabel descended, taking the footman's hand, she felt numb rather than cold. They entered the grand foyer, a cavernous space of black and white marble, where the heat from the massive fireplaces warred with the draught from the constantly opening doors. The air smelled of beeswax, hothouse flowers, and the heavy, cloying scents of French perfumes. "Hawkstone! Margaret!" Lord Redmond boomed, pushing through the crowd to greet them. He was a large man with a face flushed from too much port and a voice that carried to the rafters. "And the lovely Lady Isabel, you put the season's debutantes to shame, my dear." Isabel executed a perfect curtsy, her knees bending with the grace of a dancer, her face arranging itself into a polite, serene smile. "You are too kind, Lord Redmond." "Nonsense. Truth is not kindness," he laughed, clapping her father on the shoulder. "Come, come. Lady Redmond is in the withdrawing room. Everyone is dying to see you." As they moved deeper into the house, Isabel felt the eyes of the assembly slide over her. She could feel them assessing the cost of her emerald silk, the clarity of the diamonds at her throat, the market value of her beauty. In this world, grandeur was a weapon, and every dinner party was a battlefield where alliances were forged and enemies were dismantled over soup and sherry. She kept her chin high, her movements fluid, playing the role of the Earl's dutiful daughter to perfection, while inside she screamed. The mirror in the drawing room. The withdrawing room was a masterpiece of Georgian excess, filled with gilded furniture, brocade curtains, and enough people to make the air thin. While her parents were absorbed into a circle of high-ranking Whigs discussing the Corn Laws, Isabel drifted toward the far end of the room, seeking the illusion of space near the tall windows. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn back slightly, revealing the skeletal branches of the square's ancient oaks, silhouetted against the night sky. Isabel caught her reflection in the dark glass of the window pane. The woman in the reflection looked like a stranger. She saw the chestnut hair arranged in those elaborate, stiff curls. She saw the pale skin and the expensive jewelry, but behind the green eyes, eyes that her father always said were too expressive for her own good, she saw something else. A caged animal, a wild creature pacing back and forth behind the bars of propriety, looking for a weakness in the fence, a crack in the wall. She raised a hand to touch her throat, feeling the pulse jumping beneath the skin. "Who are you?" she asked the reflection, "and how long can you survive in this airless room before you suffocate? Isabel, darling, do step away from that window. The draught will ruin your complexion." The voice was gentle but commanding. Isabel turned to find her mother standing beside her, adjusting a sapphire earring. Margaret Montford was everything a countess should be, poised, elegant, and perfectly controlled. She was a statue of marble, impervious to the elements. "Yes, Mama." Isabel stepped back from the glass, the wild creature receding into the shadows of her mind. "I was just admiring the night." "There is nothing to admire in the dark, Isabel," her mother said, her eyes scanning the room for social threats. "Everything of importance is inside these walls." "You look flushed. Are you feverish?" "I am perfectly well," Isabel lied. "Merely a little warm." "Compose yourself," Margaret whispered, her tone dropping to a conspiratorial level. "The announcement will be made soon." You must look the part of a blushing bride, not a frightened schoolgirl. The announcement of Philip before. Isabel could ask what announcement her mother referred to. The crowd parted slightly, and her father approached, accompanied by a tall, fair-haired man with a pleasant, open face, Lord Philip Bramfield. Isabel had known Philip since she was in leading strings. He was kind, he was safe, he was wealthy, titled, and possessed of a perfectly respectable intellect. He was also, Isabel thought with a sudden, vicious pang of guilt, utterly and devastatingly boring. "Isabel," Philip said, bowing over her hand. His palms were warm and slightly damp. "You look magnificent tonight. That color, it suits you." "Thank you, Philip," she replied, her voice automatic. "I hope you are well." "Better now," he smiled, a genuine, sweet expression that made her stomach twist. "Your father and I have been discussing the final details. We intend to make the official announcement at the ball next month." "It is time, Isabel," her father said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He looked at her not with affection, but with the satisfaction of a man concluding a successful business merger. Past time, in fact. The union between Hawkston and Bramfield has been the goal for years. Philip is a good man. You are fortunate." "Fortunate," Isabel echoed, the word tasting like ash. "Yes," her mother added, reaching out to squeeze Isabel's gloved hand. "Women of your station do not marry for whimsy, my dear. They marry for alliance, for property, for the continuation of bloodlines. Love, affection, these things grow in time, like a well-tended garden. You will be safe with Philip. You will be comfortable." Philip beamed at her, oblivious to the fact that she felt like she was standing on a trapdoor. "I have already spoken to the architects about adding a new wing to the country house," he said eagerly. "I know you enjoy reading. I thought perhaps a morning room." He was so kind. That was the worst of it. If he were cruel, she could hate him. If he were ugly, she could be repulsed. But he was simply there, a pillow of suffocating softness that would smother her slowly, over decades, until the wild thing inside her stopped breathing entirely. "Come, daughter," her father said, offering his arm as the double doors to the dining hall were thrown open. "Lord and Lady Redmond will be announcing dinner soon. Philip, you shall escort Isabel." Isabel placed her hand on Philip's arm, the weight of the emerald. Silk seemed to double. The corset felt like iron bands tightening around her ribs as she allowed herself to be led toward the grand staircase, toward the inevitable future of crop rotations and polite conversation and a life devoid of fire. She felt a singular, terrifying thought crystallize in her mind. "I am going to die here. Not a physical death, but a death of the soul." She would walk down these stairs, eat this dinner, marry this man, and the Isabel who longed for wind and storms and passion would simply cease to exist. She reached the landing of the great curved marble staircase and looked down into the sea of people below. She took a breath, preparing to descend into her fate. But then, for a reason she could not name, she looked up, across the heads of the crowd, toward the base of the stairs, and the world stopped. The descent. The grand staircase of the Redmond townhouse was a masterpiece of curved marble, designed for one specific purpose: to showcase the ladies of the ton to maximum advantage as they descended into the fray of society. Isabel had descended such staircases 100 times before. She knew the drill perfectly. Chin up, shoulders back, one hand resting lightly on the balustrade, eyes scanning the crowd with a look of serene, untouchable disinterest. But tonight, as she reached the landing, where the stairs curved sharply to the right, the practiced rhythm of her life faltered. He stood at the base of the stairs, conversing with Lord Redmond, in a room filled with men wearing satin knee breeches and powdered wigs, men who smelled of lavender and easy living. He looked like a weapon that had been left leaning against the wall. He was tall, taller than Philip by several inches, with broad shoulders that strained against the fabric of his perfectly tailored black evening coat. While other men slouched with the casual affectation of boredom, this man stood with a stillness that screamed of military discipline, the kind of stillness a predator maintains right before it strikes. His hair was black, longer than fashion dictated, pulled back in a severe queue that exposed the sharp, brutal planes of his face. Isabel stopped. The movement was involuntary, a hitch in the machinery of her obedience. At that precise moment, as if he felt the weight of her gaze pressing physically against him, the man looked up. His eyes were dark, midnight dark, set beneath heavy brows. When they locked onto hers, the noise of the party, the string quartet, the laughter, the rustle of silk seemed to vanish into a vacuum. The impact was physical, a blow to the chest that stole the air from her lungs more effectively than her corset ever could. He did not smile. He did not bow. He simply watched her, his gaze sweeping over the emerald dress, the diamonds, and finally returning to her face with a look of terrifying, naked assessment. It wasn't the way Philip looked at her, like a prized possession or a well-bred mare. It was the way a wolf looks at a deer across a frozen clearing, identifying a creature of the wild, sensing a heartbeat that matched its own. "Isabel?" Philip's voice was a dull intrusion from 1,000 miles away. "My dear, is something wrong? You've stopped." She blinked, the world rushing back in a disorienting wave of sound and color. "No," she managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears, breathless and thin. "No, Philip, I nearly tripped on my hem." "Careful now," he said, patting her hand with maddening solicitude. "Lean on me." She forced her legs to move, descending the remaining steps, but her skin was prickling with a sudden electric awareness. Every step brought her closer to the gravity well of the man in black. The introduction. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Lord Redmond turned, his jovial face beaming. "Ah, here they are. Hawkstone, Bramfield, come here. I have someone you must meet." The stranger turned fully toward them. Up close, he was even more devastating. There was a scar, faint but visible, running along the line of his jaw, and fine lines of tension at the corners of his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and things seen that could not be unseen. "May I present His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorne," Redmond announced, his voice dropping an octave in reverence to the title. The Duke of Blackthorne. The name rippled through Isabel's mind. Alistair Navar, the War Duke, the man who had inherited his title at 18 and immediately left England to fight Napoleon's forces on the peninsula. Gossip about him had circulated through London for years, stories of his brutality in battle, his coldness, his refusal to return home until the job was done. He was a ghost story told in drawing rooms, a legend made flesh. "Your Grace," her father said, bowing low. "A pleasure. We had heard you returned." "The Earl of Hawkstone," the Duke acknowledged. His voice was a shock, deep, rough-edged, lacking the polished musical cadence of the court. It sounded like gravel grinding under a boot heel. "And Lord Bramfield." "Your Grace," Philip said, puffing out his chest slightly. "Welcome back to civilization." The Duke's lip curled, a micro-expression of derision that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Indeed." Then his eyes shifted to Isabel. "And this," Lord Redmond said, gesturing with a flourish, "is Lady Isabel Montford." The Duke did not bow in the exaggerated foppish manner of the other guests. He inclined his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "Lady Isabel." He spoke her name as if it were a secret they already shared. "Your Grace," she whispered, dropping into a curtsy. When she rose, she found herself trapped in his gaze again. Up close, his eyes were not just black. They were the color of deep water, turbulent and unreadable. "I trust London is to your liking, your grace?" she asked, the words automatic, a shield of politeness. "London is crowded," he replied, his gaze flickering over the crush of people behind her before returning to her face. "And loud. It lacks the honesty of the open field." "Honesty?" Philip chuckled, oblivious to the tension vibrating in the air. "I dare say there is little honesty to be found in a ballroom, your grace. It is all theatre. Some of us are better actors than others," the Duke said softly, his eyes still pinned to Isabel. He saw her. She knew it in that instant. He saw the panic behind the emerald silk. He saw the wild thing pacing in the cage. "Dinner is served," the butler's voice boomed, shattering the moment. "Shall we?" Philip offered his arm, looking pleased with himself. As Isabel turned away, she felt the Duke's gaze on her back like a physical touch, a brand of heat against the exposed skin of her neck. The dinner seating. The Redmond dining room was a cavernous hall that smelled of roast pheasant, beeswax, and expensive wine. The table was a shimmering expanse of white linen and silver, long enough to seat 40 guests. Isabel found her place card and felt a fresh wave of despair. She was seated, as expected, beside Philip. To her left was an elderly bishop who was already complaining about the draught. But directly across from her, separated only by the centerpiece of white roses and the flickering candlelight, sat the Duke of Blackthorne. It was a cosmic joke, a form of torture designed specifically for her. The first course, a delicate white soup, was served. Philip immediately launched into a monologue. "I was telling your father earlier, Isabel, that the drainage in the lower fields is finally complete," Philip said, spooning soup with precise rhythmic motions. "It should increase the yield of the wheat. Harvest by at least 15% next year. Fascinating science, really. We used a new system of clay pipes imported from the Dutch." "That sounds prudent, Philip," Isabel replied, staring at her bowl. She could feel the Duke watching her. She didn't look up, but she could feel the weight of his attention pressing against her forehead. "Prudent, exactly," Philip beamed. "And safe, low risk, high reward. That is the key to estate management and indeed to life. Predictability is the bedrock of prosperity." Across the table, the Duke sat motionless. He had not touched his soup. He held a glass of deep red wine in one large hand, his fingers long and scarred. He wasn't speaking to the woman beside him, a bubbly debutante who was trying desperately to flirt with him. He was simply existing in a sphere of silence, a dark void in the center of the chatter. Isabel risked a glance upward. He was looking right at her. He raised his glass slightly, a mocking salute to her boredom. Heat flooded her cheeks, and she quickly looked back down at her soup. The war debate. By the time the second course was cleared and the heavy roast meats were brought out, the conversation at the head of the table had turned inevitably to the state of the continent. "The Corsican monster is finished," Lord Redmond declared, carving a slice of beef with vigor. "Trapped on Elba, Europe is safe at last. I hear the French are already chafing under the return of the Bourbons," a Whig politician noted. "But surely after 20 years of war, no one has the stomach for more fighting." "The French have the stomach for whatever glory is fed to them." The Duke of Blackthorne spoke. The table went silent. It was the first time he had spoken to the group at large. His voice cut through the ambient chatter like a knife through silk. "Your Grace," Lord Redmond paused, knife poised. "Surely you don't think Napoleon remains a threat? You, of all people, must be relieved to have put down the sword." The Duke took a slow sip of wine. "I put down the sword because I was ordered to, my lord, not because the work was finished. Men like Bonaparte do not retire, they wait. But the cost," the bishop to Isabel's left spluttered, spraying crumbs of bread. "The cost in gold and blood. Surely diplomacy is the answer now. War is such a barbaric business. Necessary perhaps in the past, but we are civilized men." "Civilized," the Duke repeated, The words sounded like a curse. "There is nothing civilized about what happened in Spain, Bishop. War is not a debate in the House of Lords. It is mud and disease, and watching good men die for inches of worthless ground, while politicians in London debate the cost of their uniforms." An uncomfortable silence descended over the table. The ladies shifted in their seats, fan fluttering nervously. The gentlemen cleared their throats. The War Duke had brought the smell of blood into the dining room, and it was in poor taste. Philip leaned in, whispering to Isabel, "He is rather intense, isn't he? A bit damaged, I suppose. One must make allowances." Isabel felt a spark of anger ignite. In her chest, it started low, in her belly, and rose up to her throat, hot and choking. Damaged? No. He was real. He was the only real thing in this room of ghosts. Is it truly so terrible? The words escaped her lips before she could stop them. Her voice rang out clear and bell-like in the silence. Philip froze. Her mother, further down the table, dropped her fork with a clatter. Ladies did not interrupt political discussions. Ladies did not address the grim realities of war. The Duke's eyes snapped to hers. The darkness in them swirled, surprised and fierce. "I beg your pardon, Lady Isabel?" he asked softly. She refused to retreat. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "The newspapers, they make it sound like a grand adventure. Flags waving, heroic charges. You say it is not so. Is the truth so terrible that we cannot bear to hear it?" The shared look. For a long heartbeat, no one breathed. Philip looked horrified, his hand hovering near her arm as if to physically restrain her. The Duke lowered his wine. Glass. The harsh lines of his face softened, just a fraction. For the first time that evening he looked human. "The newspapers lie, my lady," he said, his voice low, intimate, as if they were the only two people in the room. "They sell heroism because the truth would break hearts. It is terrible, it is ugly, and it is devoid of romance." "Then why do it?" she challenged, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why go back? Because you would go back, wouldn't you? If he returned." "Yes," he said simply. "I would." "Why?" "Because there are wolves in the world, Lady Isabel. And someone must keep them from the door, so that people like—" He gestured vaguely at the table, at the silver and the crystal and the soft, soft men. "So that civilization can continue to pretend it is safe." "Isabel," Philip interjected, his laugh nervous and high-pitched. "My apologies, Your Grace. Isabel has always been spirited. She reads too many novels, I fear. It gives her rather independent notions." He placed his hand over hers on the tablecloth, a gesture of ownership, of silencing. "I am certain marriage will settle her. Such thoughts are merely a result of an overactive imagination." The air temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The Duke's gaze dropped to Philip's hand, covering Isabel's. Then it rose to Philip's face. The look was withering. It was a look that could strip the skin off a man at 50 paces. "Spirited," the Duke murmured, tasting the word. "I should think, Lord Bramfield, that an independent mind is a prize to be treasured, not a defect to be settled." He looked back at Isabel. "Do not let them tame you, Lady Isabel. The world has enough sheep. It requires more wolves." The connection between them snapped into place like a physical tether. It was an us against them, created in a single sentence. Isabel felt a flush rise from her chest to her hairline, not of embarrassment, but of pure, unadulterated thrill. For the first time in her life, she hadn't been shushed or corrected or managed. She had been met. "I shall endeavour to—" "Remember that, Your Grace," she whispered. "See that you do," he replied. As the conversation awkwardly resumed around them, Lord Redmond loudly asking about the pheasant shooting season, Isabel felt a strange sensation in her hands. She looked down. They were trembling. not with fear, but with the sudden, terrifying realization that the cage door had just been rattled, and the lock was not as strong as she thought. The withdrawal. The withdrawal of the ladies from the dining room was a ritual as old and precise as a military maneuver. At Lady Redmond's signal, 30 women rose in a rustle of expensive silk, leaving the gentlemen to their port, their cigars, and their rougher talk. Isabel felt a momentary rush of relief as the heavy oak doors closed behind them, sealing away the scent of roast meat and the overwhelming dark gravity of the Duke of Blackthorne. But the relief was short-lived. The withdrawing room, with its pastel wallpaper and delicate harp music, was merely a different kind of battlefield. Here, the weapons were not debates about war, but whispered observations and lacerating wit. She moved toward a quiet corner, feigning interest in a display of porcelain shepherdesses, but there was no escape. "Heavens, Isabel!" a voice hissed beside her. "I thought the tablecloth might catch fire." Isabel turned to find Lady Caroline Ashford standing at her elbow. Caroline was a friend from childhood, a woman who had married a viscount 2 seasons ago and now wore the armor of a respectable matron with cynical amusement. "I have no notion of what you mean," Isabel lied, picking up a porcelain figurine to give her trembling hands something to do. "Oh, do stop it," Caroline laughed softly, snapping her fan open. "The Duke of Blackthorne, the War Duke, he was looking at you as if you were the only living soul in London, and you, my dear, were looking back." "I was merely being polite," Isabel whispered, glancing around to ensure her mother was out of earshot. "He is intense. It would have been rude to ignore him." "Rude?" Caroline raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Isabel, rude is ignoring your betrothed while debating philosophy with a man who looks like he eats viscounts for breakfast." Philip looked ready to faint. "Philip is fine," Isabel snapped, then softened her tone. "Philip is always fine. That is the point of Philip." Caroline's expression sobered. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a murmur. "Be careful, Izzy. Men like Blackthorne, they are not for the likes of us. We are bred for safety, for salons and nurseries. That man has winter in his eyes. He will ruin you, and he won't even mean to." Isabel set the shepherdess back on the shelf. "He is leaving soon, I am sure. He hates society. I shall likely never see him again." "For your sake," Caroline said, patting her arm. "I hope that is true, but I saw the way he watched you leave the room. A wolf does not track a scent, only to lose interest at the first fence." The men return. An hour passed. An hour of tea, of polite inquiries about children Isabel didn't have, and houses she didn't care about. She sat on a striped satin settee, her embroidery hoop in her lap, pushing the needle through the fabric with mechanical precision. In, out, in, out. A safe, predictable rhythm. Then the double doors opened. The sound of booming male laughter drifted in, carried on a wave of scent, rich tobacco smoke, brandy, and the musk of men who had loosened their cravats. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The ladies straightened their spines. Fans fluttered with renewed vigor. The peacocks had returned to the display. Isabel kept her eyes on her needlework. "Do not look up," she commanded herself. "If you do not look, he is not there." "Lady Isabel." The voice was low, rough, and vibrated through the floorboards. Directly into the soles of her feet, she jabbed the needle into her thumb. A tiny bead of crimson blood bloomed on the white linen. She looked up. He was standing directly in front of her. He had not stopped to speak to the hostess. He had not grabbed a glass of sherry. He had walked through the crowd as if it were mist, straight to her. "Your Grace," she breathed, tucking her injured thumb into her palm. "You startled me." "My apologies," the Duke said, though he didn't look sorry. He looked focused. "I noticed you left the table with some haste." "It is the custom, Your Grace. The ladies withdraw." "A foolish custom." he observed, glancing around the room with disdain. It separates the conversation just as it becomes interesting. I found the rest of the discussion downstairs lacking. Did Philip not entertain you with his theories on crop rotation? The sarcasm slipped out before she could check it. A corner of the Duke's mouth ticked upward, a almost smile. Lord Bramfield was eloquent on the subject of turnips. I, however, preferred your thoughts on wolves. Isabel felt the heat rising in her cheeks again. He was standing too close. By the standards of the Ton, he was invading her personal space, occupying the air she needed to breathe. Your Grace, Lady Redmond's voice cut through the tension. The hostess swept toward them, a vision in purple silk, desperate to claim her prize guest. I was hoping you might favor us with a story from your travels, or perhaps... She pivoted to Isabel, sensing the danger and trying to diffuse it. Lady Isabel would play for us. You are quite accomplished on the pianoforte, are you not, my dear? Isabel froze. My skills are modest, Lady Redmond. Nonsense! Her mother's voice chimed in from across the room. Margaret Montford's eyes were sharp, warning. Perform. Be perfect. Distract him. Isabel plays beautifully. Mozart, I think, darling. It was a command, not a request. I would be honored to listen, the Duke said, stepping back and offering his arm. Allow me. The piano performance. Isabel placed her hand on his forearm. The muscle beneath the black wool was hard as iron. He led her to the grand piano in the corner of the room, the crowd parting for them. Do you play, Your Grace? She asked, desperate to fill the silence as they walked. No, he said. My hands were trained for other things. The implication hung heavy. Between them, swords, reins, violence. She sat at the bench, arranging her skirts. The ivory keys gleamed under the chandelier light. She took a deep breath. She could feel him standing just behind her to the right, leaning against the wall. He wasn't mingling. He was guarding, watching. She began to play. Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 8, in a minor. It was a tragic, turbulent piece, full of dissonance and restless energy. It was not the light, airy tunes usually favored by young ladies seeking husbands. Isabel let the music take her. For the first time that evening, she didn't have to speak or smile or lie. She poured her frustration into the chords. She played for the corset that squeezed her. Ribs. She played for the emerald dress that felt like a costume. She played for Philip and his turnips and his safe, suffocating love. Her fingers flew across the keys, striking the notes with a force that surprised the room. The polite chatter died down. People turned to watch. It wasn't just technical proficiency, it was emotion, raw and bleeding, disguised as art. She played the allegro maestoso with a fury that made her heart race. I am here, the music screamed. I am alive. Do not bury me yet. When she hit the final, somber chord, letting the sound decay into the silence of the room, she sat with her head bowed, breathing hard. There was a pause, and then polite applause broke out. Charming, quite charming, Lady Redmond chirped, though she looked slightly unsettled by the intensity of the performance. Isabel stood, her knees shaking. She turned to find the Duke. He hadn't applauded. He was staring at her with a dark, brooding intensity that made her shiver. He looked like a man who had just watched a bird smash itself against a window pane. The conversation on freedom. You play beautifully, he said quietly as he moved to intercept her before Philip could reach them. He offered his arm again, steering her not back to her seat, but toward the French doors that led to the terrace. They didn't go outside, that would be scandal, but they stood in the shadows of the heavy drapes, slightly apart from the crowd. Thank you, she said, but you were not enjoying it. Isabel blinked, startled. I beg your pardon? The music, Alistair said, looking down at her. It was technically perfect, but it was angry. You play because it is expected, not because you love it, am I wrong? She looked at him, really looked at him. How did he see so much? No, she admitted, her voice a whisper. "You are not wrong. I play because a countess's daughter must have accomplishments. It increases my value." "And what do you love?" The question was so direct, so stripped of social artifice, that it disarmed her completely. Gentlemen asked about the weather, they asked about mutual acquaintances. They did not ask about the secrets of her soul. She hesitated. "I should not say." "Tell me," he commanded softly. "Tell me one true thing tonight, Isabel." Isabel looked past him at the reflection of the candlelight in the window. "I love riding," she confessed, "not in the park where one must trot and nod at passers-by. I love the country. I love galloping across open ground where there are no fences, no paths, no eyes watching. I love the wind in my face. I love the feeling that I could just keep going and never stop." "Freedom," he said. The word fell from his lips like a prayer. "You crave freedom." She looked back at him. "Do you not?" Shadow passed over his face, old and deep. He looked away toward the crowded room where the elite of London laughed and drank. "I lost my freedom in Spain, Lady Isabel, on battlefields where freedom meant nothing, and duty meant sending boys to die in the mud." He turned back to her, and his eyes were haunted. "I am a duke. I own half of Derbyshire. I have wealth, power, and influence. And yet I look at you talking about riding without fences, and I realize I have been in a cage for 10 years, a cage of orders, of expectations, of ghosts." "We are both prisoners then," she whispered. "You to your past, and I to my future." His hand tightened on his own sleeve, as if he wanted to reach out and touch her, but was restraining himself with sheer will. "A future with Bramfield." "Yes. It is a cage, Isabel. You know that, don't you? He is a good man, I'm sure. But he will clip your wings. He will put you in a morning room and ask you to embroider while you wither away." "I have no choice," she said, her voice trembling. "It is arranged. It is duty. The warning duty." He spat the word. "I know duty. I have bled for duty, but this is not duty. This is a sacrifice." He took a step closer, invading her space, his voice dropping to a low, fierce growl. "When is the wedding?" 3 weeks, she answered. "The first Saturday in March." Alistair flinched, as if she had struck him. 3 weeks. He looked at her, his gaze searching her face, memorizing the curve of her lip, the fear in her eyes. "He does not deserve you." The declaration was shocking. It was improper. It was treason against the laws of their society. "Your Grace." "No," he interrupted, his voice rising slightly in intensity. "Do not grace me. Look at me. You are fire and air, Isabel. You are wild, and you are about to chain yourself to a man who thinks the height of excitement is a new drainage pipe. It is a tragedy. You do not know me." She protested weakly, though her heart was hammering a traitorous rhythm against her ribs. "Yes, say it again. Tell me I am more than this." "I know you," he said. "I saw you on the stairs. I heard you at the piano. I see you now. You are terrified. You are screaming for someone to open the door." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could smell him. Soap, and the faint metallic tang of the cold night air clinging to his coat. "If you marry him," he whispered, "you will die." "Inside, I have seen men die, Isabel. I know the look, and I see it in your eyes right now." "Isabel." The voice shattered the moment like a rock through glass. They sprang apart. Philip was standing a few feet away, holding 2 glasses of lemonade, looking confused and slightly hurt. "Isabel," Philip said, eyeing the Duke warily, "I have been looking for you. Your mother is asking if you are ready to depart. The carriage is brought round." Isabel felt as though she had been woken from a trance. She looked at Alistair. His face had closed up again. The mask of the Duke was back in place, cold, remote, untouchable, but his eyes were still burning. "I am ready, Philip," she said, her voice shaking. "Your Grace." Philip nodded stiffly. "A pleasure." "Bramfield," the Duke acknowledged. As Philip led her away, placing the lemonade glass in her hand, Isabel felt a phantom sensation on her skin, a lingering heat where the Duke had been standing. "Strange fellow," Philip muttered as they walked toward the cloakroom. "Very aggressive. I hope he did not distress you, my dear." Isabel stopped at the doorway. She looked back one last time. The Duke of Blackthorne was still standing by the window, alone in the crowd, watching her go. He didn't look away. He didn't blink. "No, Philip," she said softly, clutching the cold glass of lemonade. "He did not distress me. He woke me up." "Come along then," Philip said cheerfully. "I must tell you about the irrigation plans for the wedding breakfast. Father has some splendid ideas." As she walked out into the cold London night, the Duke's words echoed in her mind, louder than the carriage wheels, louder than her own pulse. 3 weeks, the aftermath, the carriage ride. Back to Hawkston House was a study in suffocating silence. The euphoria of the music and the terrifying thrill of the Duke's proximity had faded, leaving Isabel cold and trembling in the dark corner of the velvet-lined compartment. Her father had remained at the club for a final brandy with Lord Redmond, leaving Isabel alone with her mother. The Countess of Hawkston sat erect, her posture yielding nothing to the swaying of the carriage, her eyes fixed on her daughter with unnerving precision. "You were very quiet this evening, Isabel," her mother observed finally. The tone was casual, but the intent was surgical, and yet simultaneously the center of attention. "I am sure I do not know." "What you mean, Mamma?" Isabel murmured, pulling her fur-lined cloak tighter around her throat. "I played the piano as requested." "You played like a woman possessed," Margaret Montford corrected gently. "And the Duke of Blackthorne seemed quite taken with the performance, or rather, with the performer." Isabel's head snapped up. "I am certain you are mistaken. The Duke he is merely eccentric. He knows no one in London. He was likely just looking for a familiar face, however brief the acquaintance." Her mother gave a low, elegant sigh, turning to look out at the passing gaslights. "I'm not mistaken, my dear. I have survived 20 seasons in this city. I know the look of a man who has found something he wants." She turned back, her expression softening into something pitiable. "But you must remember your place, Isabel. You are betrothed to Lord Bramfield. The contracts are signed. The banns will be read next week. Nothing can change that." "I know, Mamma." "Do you?" The Countess reached across the carriage to squeeze Isabel's gloved hand. The leather felt cold. "I know Philip may seem uninspiring. He is not a man of poetry or war. But he is good, he is kind, and he is steady. Is that enough?" The words escaped before Isabel could stop them, a desperate whisper in the dark. "Is it enough to just be steady?" "Passion fades, Isabel," her mother said, her voice sounding suddenly very old. "Fire burns itself out and leaves only ash, but stability endures. It builds houses, it raises children. It keeps you warm when you are old." "And what if I want the fire?" Isabel asked, tears pricking her eyes. "What if I don't want to be merely warm? What if I want to burn?" "Then you want what most women want and few receive," her mother replied, withdrawing her hand. "We must make our peace with reality, my darling. That is what it means to be a woman of our class. We do not choose, we accept." Isabel turned back to the window, blinking against the sudden sting of tears. Her mother was right, of course. She had always known this. Marriage was duty, not desire, security, not passion. But tonight, for the first time, she had glimpsed another possibility. She had felt, for just a moment, what it might be like to be truly seen, not as an asset, but as a soul. And that glimpse, she feared, would make her cage unbearable. 3 days of silence. 3 days passed. 3 days of grey skies and relentless, driving rain that turned the streets of Mayfair into rivers of sludge. Isabel told herself firmly that she would forget the encounter at the Redmond dinner. She told herself that the Duke of Blackthorne was a momentary madness, a symptom of pre-wedding nerves. She failed spectacularly. She found herself unable to sit still. She would pick up a book, read the same sentence 10 times without comprehending it, and then snap the volume shut. She paced the length of the drawing room until her mother asked if she was practicing for a marathon. She snapped at Sarah for pulling her hair too tight, then immediately apologized, bursting into tears that she couldn't explain. She was haunted. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. The midnight eyes, the scar on his jaw, the way he stood, still as a predator, radiating a dangerous magnetic heat. She heard his voice, rough and low. "You crave freedom." He had planted a seed of rebellion in her chest, and the rain was watering it. "My lady," Sarah asked on the 3rd afternoon, holding up a swatch of silk. "For the wedding breakfast, the dressmaker needs to know if you prefer the ivory or the cream." "Burn them both," Isabel muttered, staring out the window at the rain-lashed square. "My lady?" Sarah gasped. "The ivory," Isabel corrected, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. "Tell her the ivory. It does not matter. None of it matters." Hyde Park. The promenade. On the 4th day, the sun finally broke through. The pale, watery light drew all of London out of its houses like ants from a disturbed hill. It was the fashionable hour, the time of day when the ton descended upon Hyde Park, to see and be seen. Isabel had tried to plead a headache, but Philip had arrived at Hawkstone House with his new curricle, eager to show off his prized acquisition. "They are magnificent animals, are they not?" Philip beamed as he handed her up into the high-wheeled carriage. He pointed his whip at the 2 dapple-grey horses harnessed to the front. "Matched perfectly. Look at the step. Cost a fortune, but father agreed that a man in my position must maintain standards." "They are lovely, Philip," Isabel said dutifully, adjusting her parasol. They joined the slow-moving parade of vehicles circling the park's main drive. It was a tedious ritual. Every 10 yards they had to stop to exchange pleasantries with a duchess or a baronet. Everyone congratulated them on the upcoming nuptials. Everyone smiled the same frozen smile. "We shall have to be careful of the mud," Philip fretted, eyeing a puddle. "I should hate to splash the varnish. I had the carriage explicitly detailed for today." "Of course," Isabel said, watching a pair of ducks paddle across the Serpentine. She felt a scream building in her throat again. "Is this my life, discussing varnish and mud for the next 40 years? I say," Philip squinted, looking ahead. "Is that Blackthorne?" Isabel's heart stopped. She followed Philip's gaze, approaching them from the opposite direction, cutting through the traffic of delicate carriages and docile ponies, was a figure that looked like it. Had ridden out of a myth. The Duke of Blackthorne rode alone. He was not in a carriage. He was mounted on a massive black stallion, a beast of obvious Spanish blood, with a thick, arched neck and muscles that rippled beneath a coat like obsidian. The horse was dancing sideways, chewing at the bit, full of nervous, explosive energy. And the rider matched him. Alistair wore a riding coat of dark charcoal, his boots polished to a mirror shine, his seat deep and effortless. He controlled the powerful animal with one hand on the reins, his body moving in perfect synchronization with the beast. He looked wild, in a park full of groomed poodles and gelded ponies. He was a wolf. As he drew closer, his eyes found hers across the distance. Time seemed to warp. The chatter of the park faded. There was only the rhythmic thud of the black stallion's hooves and the racing of Isabel's heart. The confrontation on the path. The Duke reached them and drew his horse alongside Philip's delicate curricle. The black stallion towered over Philip's matched greys, snorting and tossing its head, forcing Philip to tighten his grip on his own reins to keep his horses from shying. "Bramfield," the Duke said with a curt nod. Then his eyes locked onto Isabel, and the intensity of his gaze hit her like physical sunlight. "Lady Isabel, the sun favors us today." "Your Grace," she managed, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I did not think you one for the promenade." "I am not," he admitted, his voice rough. "I find the pace sluggish. But I found myself reconsidering certain habits." The way he said it, the way his eyes traveled over her face, made it clear he wasn't talking about riding in the park. Philip, oblivious to the undercurrents, decided to assert his masculinity through the only avenue he understood, commerce. "Fine animal you have there, Your Grace," Philip said, eyeing the stallion. "And illusion, if I'm not mistaken. Bit heavy for a park hack, isn't he? Must be difficult to manage in a crowd." "He was bred for war, not for parades," the Duke replied, stroking the stallion's neck. The horse calmed instantly under his touch. "He finds the restraint intolerable, as do I. We are both better suited to open country, where we can run without fences." Isabel felt the words vibrate in her bones. Open country, no fences. "Perhaps you should return to the country then," Isabel said, though her voice lacked any real bite. "If London does not suit you." "I had intended to," Alistair said, his dark eyes burning into hers. "But I find there is a compelling reason to remain." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Well?" Philip said, sensing the awkwardness but misinterpreting the cause. "We are thinking of breeding these greys. The bloodlines are exceptional, docile temperaments. Very obedient. What do you think, Isabel?" "I think," she said, tearing her gaze from the Duke with enormous effort, "that you should consult someone more knowledgeable, Philip." "Nonsense. Your opinion matters. They will be your horses too in 3 weeks." Philip patted her knee. The Duke's horse shifted restlessly, hooves clattering on the stone path. Alistair's jaw tightened. He looked at Philip's hand on her knee with an expression of cold, calculated violence. 3 weeks, the Duke repeated. His voice was flat, dead. "How organized?" "Indeed," Philip smiled. "We must continue our circuit, Your Grace. Mother is expecting us for tea. Good day." Philip clicked his tongue to his. "Horses." "Lady Isabel," the Duke said sharply. Philip paused. "Yes? Might I have a word with Lady Isabel?" The Duke didn't look at Philip. "I have a message from her father regarding a property matter in Derbyshire. It requires her confirmation." It was a lie, a transparent, flimsy lie, but it was spoken by a Duke, and Philip Bramfield was a man who obeyed the hierarchy of the peerage above all else. "Oh," Philip frowned. "Well, surely it can wait until—" "It cannot," Alistair said. Philip sighed. "Very well, but do not wander far. It would not be seemly." He offered his hand to help Isabel down, but Alistair was faster. He swung down from his stallion, handing the reins to a passing street urchin with a coin, and reached up. His hands spanned Isabel's waist, lifting her from the carriage as if she weighed nothing. For a second, she was suspended in the air, held by him. His grip was firm, possessive. She felt the heat of his body through her dress, the hardness of his chest. He set her down, but didn't immediately step back. "Walk with me," he commanded. The private moment. They walked a short distance away, toward a small grove of elms that offered a shred of privacy from the prying eyes of the ton. "You should not have done that," Isabel hissed, though she was matching his long strides. "Philip will be suspicious." "Let him be suspicious," Alistair growled. "I do not care about Philip Bramfield. I care about you." He stopped abruptly, turning to face her. They were shielded by the trees, but anyone looking closely could still see them. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You are tormenting me." "I am trying to save you," he retorted. 3 weeks, Isabel. You are walking toward a cliff edge and smiling. I am doing my duty." "To whom? To a title? To a plot of land. He stepped closer, invading her space again. The scent of him, leather, horse, and sandalwood, filled her senses. What about your duty to yourself, to your own heart? My heart is not part of the contract, she said, looking down. Then break the contract. Isabel gasped. I cannot. It would be a scandal. I would be ruined. Better ruined than dead, he said fiercely. He reached out, his gloved finger tilting her chin up until she was forced to look at him. Look at me, Isabel. Tell me you love him. Tell me your heart races when he talks about carriage varnish. Tell me you want to spend the next 50 years sitting in his morning room, and I will walk away. I swear it. I will mount my horse and ride back to Derbyshire and never trouble you again. She opened her mouth to say the words. I love him. It should have been easy. It was the lie she had been practicing for months. But looking into those midnight eyes, seeing the raw, naked need in them, the words died in her throat. She faltered. You cannot, he whispered triumphantly. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, a touch so tender it made her knees weak. Because you feel this too, this madness, this pull. It is not just me. It does not matter what I feel, she said, a tear escaping to track through the dust on her cheek. I am trapped, Alistair. It was the first time she had used his given name. He froze. The sound of his name on her lips seemed to break something inside him. No, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You are not trapped. Not yet. You have 3 weeks. And I am going to use every hour of them. What do you mean? I mean, I am going to court you, Isabel Montford, he vowed. I am going to show you what it means to be treasured, not for your dowry, not for your bloodline, but for you, the wild, fierce, brilliant woman you are. You cannot court an engaged woman, she protested, panic and exhilaration warring in her chest. Watch me. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. I will fight for you, Isabel. I will fight Bramfield, your father, the entire House of Lords if I have to, but I need to know that there is a chance. Just a chance. Alistair, please. Give me these 3 weeks, he begged. Let me show you what freedom feels like. If, at the end, you still choose him, I will let you go, but do not condemn us both to darkness without letting me show you the light. Isabel! Philip's voice called out from the path, tinged with impatience. We must go! Isabel stepped back, her breath coming in short gasps. She looked at Philip, waiting in his safe, polished carriage. Then she looked at Alistair, standing tall and scarred and terrifyingly real. She made a choice. Not the final choice, but the first one. Show me, she whispered. Alistair's smile was slow, devastating, and utterly victorious. Meet me, he said rapidly. Tomorrow, dawn, the north end of the Serpentine. Come alone. I cannot. Dawn, Isabel. If you do not come, I will know my answer. He bowed formally, loud enough for Philip to see. Thank you for your assistance. With the estate matters, Lady Isabel. Good day. He turned and strode back to his stallion, mounting in one fluid motion. He didn't look back as he thundered away, the black horse kicking up clods of earth that splattered onto the pristine path. Isabel walked back to Philip's carriage, her legs trembling. Everything sorted? Philip asked, helping her up. What did he want? Just a boundary dispute, Isabel said, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. It is resolved. As Philip drove them away, chattering about the dinner menu, Isabel gripped the side of the carriage. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Dawn. She was terrified. She was exhilaratingly, dangerously alive. And she knew, with a certainty that shook her to her core, that she would be at the Serpentine when the sun came up. The letter that evening, a letter arrived at Hawkstone House. Isabel was in her bedchamber, supposedly resting before dinner, though in truth she was pacing the length of the Persian rug, wearing a path into the intricate wool. Her mind was a chaotic storm of Philip's voice discussing carriage varnish and the Duke's dark eyes promising freedom. When Sarah entered with a small silver salver, her expression was puzzled. "A messenger brought this to the scullery door, my lady. He said it was urgent. There is no seal." Isabel's heart gave a violent lurch. She took the heavy cream envelope. Her name was written on the front in bold masculine script, sharp angles and heavy ink. Lady Isabel, not the Lady Isabel Montford, just her name. "Thank you, Sarah. You may go." "But my lady, your hair—" "Leave me!" Isabel snapped, then immediately regretted it. "Please, Sarah, just give me a moment." Once a door clicked shut, she broke the wax. There was no crest, no signature, just the handwriting that looked like it had been carved with a knife. "Isabel, I write this knowing it is madness. I should leave you to your life. I should respect the walls you have built, the duty you cling to like a shield. But I am a selfish man. I have spent 10 years taking what I want from the world by force, and yet tonight I find myself begging. You asked if I knew what it was to be caged. I do. I have lived in a cage of my own making, a cage of honor, of memory, of the ghosts of men who died on my orders. I thought I was content to rot there. Then I saw you. I do not know what this is. I only know that when you are near, the ghosts are silent. I know that you are drowning, Isabel. I see the water rising over your head while everyone around you compliments you on your swimming. Let me pull you out. I will be at the north end of the Serpentine at dawn. If you do not come, I will understand. I will assume you have chosen the cage. But if there is even a spark of the wildfire I see in your eyes, meet me. Let me show you what it feels like to breathe. Yours, A. Isabel read the letter 3 times. Her hands shook so badly the paper rattled. Yours. A single word that dismantled her defenses more effectively than any siege engine. She tucked the letter beneath her pillow, knowing she would not sleep. The decision had already been made. Her soul had packed its bags the moment she met his eyes on the stairs. The escape. The house was silent as a tomb when Isabel rose. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 5 times, a lonely, hollow sound in the pre-dawn dark. She did not ring for Sarah. For the first time in her life she dressed herself. It was a clumsy, difficult process. She struggled with the hooks of her riding habit, a dark navy wool that she usually reserved for the country. She forewent the corset, unable to bear the restriction, choosing only a chemise and the heavy jacket. It felt scandalous, it felt wonderful. She braided her hair quickly, caring little for the loose wisps that escaped, and pulled on her boots. Sneaking out of her father's house felt like a military operation. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. She slipped down the back stairs, through the scullery where the cook was just beginning to stir the fires, and out into the stable yard. The air was cold enough to hurt. Mist clung to the cobblestones, thick and grey, muffling the sounds of the waking city. "My lady!" Tom, the undergroom, blinked sleepily at her from the stable door, a lantern in his hand. "Is everything all right? It's barely light." "I wish to ride, Tom," she said, pitching her voice to sound authoritative, the voice of the Earl's daughter. "Saddle the mare, and you shall accompany me." "Now? But my lady, the master is asleep, and I have a headache that only the morning air will cure. Do as I say, Tom, and be quick about it. Or must I wake the head groom?" Tom scrambled to obey. 10 minutes later, they were trotting through the misty streets toward Hyde Park. Isabel rode, side saddle as propriety demanded, but her grip on the reins was tight. She felt like a fugitive. She felt like a queen. As they reached the park gates, she pulled her mare up. "Wait here, Tom." "My lady!" The boy looked terrified. "I can't let you ride alone. It ain't safe. There's vagrants." "I am not going far," she lied, her heart hammering. "Just to the Serpentine and back. I need solitude, Tom. Stay here. If you follow me, I shall have you dismissed." It was a cruel threat. one she would never act upon, but it worked. Tom paled and nodded. Isabel turned her horse and kicked it into a canter, diving into the fog, leaving safety behind. Tempest, the north end of the Serpentine, was a ghostly world of grey water and weeping willows. The mist swirled over the surface of the lake, obscuring the far bank. He was there. Alistair stood beneath the canopy of a massive oak tree, holding the reins of 2 horses. His black stallion was there, pawing the earth, steaming in the cold air. Beside it stood a mare Isabel had never seen before, a chestnut creature with a white blaze and eyes that rolled with intelligent, nervous energy. Alistair wore a heavy riding coat, the collar turned up against the damp. He looked tired, shadows bruising the skin beneath his eyes, as if he, too, had spent the night pacing. But when he saw her emerge from the mist, his whole body went rigid. With relief, "You came," he said. The words were torn out of him. "I should not have," Isabel replied, sliding down from her horse. Her knees felt weak, not from the ride, but from the sheer gravity of his presence. "This is madness, Alistair." "The best kind." He dropped the reins of the horses and stepped toward her. He didn't touch her, but he leaned in, inhaling sharply as if breathing her in. "I thought you wouldn't come. I spent the last hour convincing myself I was a fool." "You are a fool," she whispered. "We both are." He smiled, a quick flash of white in the gloom. "Come, I want to show you something." He gestured to the chestnut mare. "This is Tempest." Isabel stepped closer. The mare snorted and tossed her head, ears pinning back slightly. She was beautiful, sleek, muscular, and radiating a kinetic energy that warned she was not a pet. "She is spirited," Isabel noted. "She is difficult," Alistair corrected. "She threw 3 grooms before I bought her. My stable master says she is unmanageable. He wanted to sell her to a hauler." "And why didn't you?" "Because she isn't broken," Alistair said softly, stroking the mare's nose. Tempest settled under his hand, though her eyes remained watchful. "She just hates the bit. She hates being told where to go by men who don't understand her. She needs to run, Isabel, not trot. Run!" He looked at Isabel then, and the metaphor hung between them, shimmering in the air. "She is yours," he said, "for the morning, if you think you can handle her." Isabel looked at the mare. Then she looked at her own docile, safe mount, a horse chosen by her father for its lack of surprises. Then she looked at the Duke. "I can handle her," she said. The race, helping her mount Tempest, was an intimacy in itself. Alistair's hands lingered on her waist as he threw her up into the saddle. The mare danced sideways, testing the weight, but Isabel gathered the reins with confident, soft hands, murmuring low, soothing sounds. Tempest's ears flicked forward, listening. Alistair mounted his stallion. The 2 horses stood side by side, vibrating with potential energy. "Where are we going?" Isabel asked, adjusting her grip. The leather reins felt alive in her hands. Alistair pointed toward the stretch of open parkland that ran parallel to the water, empty of carriages at this ungodly hour. "Nowhere," he said. "Just fast. Can you keep up, my wild one?" It was a challenge. "Try me." Isabel didn't wait for a signal. She squeezed her legs, and Tempest exploded forward. The acceleration was breathtaking. One moment they were standing still. The next, the wind was tearing the hood of her cloak back, stinging her eyes. Tempest didn't run. She flew. There was no hesitation, no polite trot. It was pure, raw speed. Isabel laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound was ripped from her throat by the wind. Beside her, a dark shape blurred. Alistair was there, his black stallion matching Tempest stride for stride. He wasn't looking ahead. He was looking at her. He was watching her laugh, watching her hair fly loose from its braid, watching the sheer, unadulterated joy transform her face. They thundered across the wet grass, mud flying up behind them. The world narrowed down to this, the rhythmic pounding of hooves, the burn of cold air in her lungs, and the man riding beside her. For the first time in her life, Isabel wasn't being led. She wasn't being escorted. She was racing. She urged Tempest faster, and the mare responded. With a surge of power that terrified and thrilled her, they passed the Serpentine, past the sleeping swans, tearing through the fog like spirits released from the underworld. Isabel felt the corset of her life snap. The rules, the expectations, the fear. They couldn't keep up with this speed. They were left behind in the mist. The first kiss, they slowed as they reached a secluded grove of ancient chestnuts at the far edge of the park. The horses were blowing hard, their sides heaving, steam rising from their coats into the damp air. Isabel pulled Tempest to a halt. She was gasping for breath, her cheeks flushed a brilliant, feverish red, her hair a disaster. She felt more alive than she had ever felt in 22 years. Alistair brought his stallion alongside. He looked at her with a ferocity that made her tremble. "Glorious," he rasped. "You are glorious." He swung down from his saddle and came to her. He didn't offer his hand to help her down politely. He reached up and gripped her waist. Isabel let go of the reins and slid down into his arms. Her feet touched the ground, but he didn't let go. He pressed her back against the warm flank of the heaving mare. "Did you feel it?" he demanded, his voice rough. "Tell me you felt it." "I felt it," she whispered, looking up at him. Her chest was heaving against his. "I felt free." "You are free. With me, you are free." He looked at her mouth. The air between them crackled, charged with the adrenaline of the ride and the months of suppressed desire. "I am going to kiss you, Isabel," he said. It was a warning, a promise. "If you want me to stop, tell me now. Tell me to go, and I will mount my horse and ride to hell, but do not tell me to stop unless you mean it." Isabel looked at the scar on his jaw. She looked at the dark, haunted eyes that were currently filled with a desperate hope. She thought of Philip and his drainage pipes. She thought of the ivory wedding dress. She grabbed the lapels of his coat and pulled him down. "Don't stop," she breathed. His mouth crashed onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It wasn't the chaste, dry peck Philip had given her once on the cheek. This was a collision. It tasted of cold air and hot desire, of desperation and claiming. Alistair kissed her as if he were drowning and she was air. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her head back to deepen the angle. Isabel made a small, whimpering sound in her throat and opened to him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing herself against the hardness of his body, needing to be closer, needing to burn. For a long, timeless moment, there was nothing but the heat of his mouth and the strength of his arms. The world dissolved. There was no earldom, no scandal, no society, just Alistair. When he finally pulled back, resting, his forehead against hers, they were both shaking. "Isabel!" he groaned, his voice wrecked. "My God, Isabel!" She kept her eyes closed, trying to hold on to the moment. "I'm in trouble," she whispered. "I am in so much trouble." "No." He pulled back slightly, forcing her to look at him. His hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing over her. Flushed cheekbones. "We are in this together. I have you. I will not let you fall." "I have 3 weeks," she said, the reality crashing back in. 3 weeks until the wedding. 3 weeks, he agreed. 3 weeks for me to prove to you that this, he gestured between them, is worth burning your world down for. "And if you prove it?" She asked, searching his eyes. "What then?" "Then we burn it down together," he said fiercely, "and we build something new from the ashes." He kissed her again, softer this time, a seal on a pact. "I will see you tomorrow," he said, "and the day after, and the day after that. I will court you, Isabel Montford. I will win you." Isabel stepped back, her hand going to her bruised, tingling lips. She knew she should be terrified. She knew she was standing on the precipice of ruin, but as she looked at Alistair, standing in the mist with the wind in his hair and his heart in his eyes, she smiled. "You may try, Your Grace," she whispered. "You may certainly try." The campaign begins. The following days did not pass. They blurred. Time, usually so rigid in the life of a debutante, measured in quarter hours by social calls and dress fittings, became a fluid, dangerous thing. Alistair kept his word. He did not court her in the drawing rooms of Mayfair with poetry and polite conversation. He courted her like a general laying siege to a fortress he intended to take intact. He was everywhere, a dark, silent gravity that pulled the orbit of her life toward him. He sent flowers, but never the hothouse roses Philip favored. Philip's flowers were uniform, scentless, and arrived in crystal vases. Alistair's offerings looked as though they had been torn from the earth by his own hands, mere hours before. One morning, it was a bundle of wild heather, purple and tough, wrapped in rough twine. Another day, it was sprays of hawthorn and dangerous-looking thistles. They smelled of rain and soil and wild places. "Curious choices," her mother remarked, eyeing a vase of foxgloves that Isabel had insisted on keeping on her vanity. "One might almost and think the Duke is mocking the tradition, or perhaps he simply prefers things that have not been cultivated to death," Isabel replied, touching a velvet petal. "He appeared at balls, though he rarely danced. He would stand at the perimeter of the room, a monolith in black amidst the sea of pastel silks and satin breeches. Whenever Isabel looked up, from a quadrille or a conversation, she would find him watching her. His gaze was a physical weight, heavy and heated. He didn't need to speak. The look said everything. "I see you. You are performing. Come to me." It was a seduction of the mind as much as the senses. He was forcing her to acknowledge the cage by simply standing outside of it and holding the key. The Royal Society lecture. 5 days after their ride in the park, Isabel accompanied her father and Philip to a lecture at the Royal Society. The topic was the application of steam power in industrial mining. It was precisely the sort of dry, mechanical subject that ladies were expected to endure with glazed eyes while their husbands nodded sagely. Philip spent the first 20 minutes checking his pocket watch. "Terribly dry speaker," he whispered to Isabel, stifling a yawn behind his glove. "I believe we might leave early, my dear. I promised Mother we would stop by the jeweller's." Isabel didn't answer. She was leaning forward, her eyes fixed on the diagrams being unfurled on the stage. She was fascinated by the concept of pressure, of contained energy being used to move mountains. It felt like a metaphor for her own existence. "Lady Isabel finds the talker ratios compelling, Bramfield. Do not distract her." The voice came from directly behind them. Isabel's skin prickled. She didn't need to turn to know. Alistair was there. Philip jumped. "Your Grace, I didn't see you enter." "I prefer the back," Alistair murmured. He leaned forward, his face dangerously close to Isabel's shoulder. "The containment valve," he said, his voice low and rough, meant only for her ear. "If the pressure exceeds the vessel's strength, it explodes. A simple principle, but a destructive one. Do you not agree, Lady Isabel?" Isabel turned her head slightly. He was there, inches away. She could see the dark stubble on his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. He wasn't talking about steam engines. "Explosions can be useful, Your Grace," she whispered back, "if they clear the way for something new. Or they can simply leave." "Ruins," Philip interjected, missing the subtext entirely. "Which is why I prefer traditional methods. Steam is volatile, unpredictable." "Like all powerful things," Alistair said, his eyes never leaving Isabel's. When the lecture ended and the crowd began to file out, Philip was detained by an acquaintance near the door. Alistair manoeuvred to Isabel sighed with the fluidity of water. "You understood the mechanics," he observed. "I watched you. You were calculating the load bearing in your head." "I have always liked mathematics," Isabel admitted, clutching her reticule. "It is honest. The numbers do not lie to you to spare your feelings. And yet you hide it. Philip prefers a wife who is ornamental. He finds intellect in women to be taxing." Alistair's expression darkened, a storm cloud passing over the sun. "Then he is a fool who deserves neither your beauty nor your mind. A man worthy of you, Isabel, would hand you the blueprints and ask you to build the engine yourself. He would celebrate your brilliance, not ask you to dim it, so his own mediocrity shines brighter." The praise hit her harder than any compliment about her eyes or hair ever had. He saw her mind, and he didn't want to cage it. "You are dangerous," she breathed. "I am honest," he countered. "There is a difference." The garden party. 2 days later, at Lady Peyton's garden party in Richmond, the cracks in Alistair's armour and the depth of Isabel's feelings became undeniable. It was a glorious afternoon, the lawns sweeping down to the Thames, the air filled with the sound of string quartets and laughter. Alistair was there, of course. He was always there now. He stood apart from the main group near the edge of the rows. In garden, holding a glass of champagne he hadn't touched, Isabel managed to slip away from Philip, who was engrossed in a discussion about the price of wool, and made her way toward the Duke. "You look like a thundercloud at a picnic," she teased gently as she approached. Alistair looked at her, and the tension in his shoulders eased instantly. "And you look like spring itself," he said, his gaze sweeping over her pale yellow muslin dress, "though I know there is a winter storm underneath." Before she could reply, a loud crack echoed across the lawn. It was merely a servant dropping a heavy wooden tray onto the stone patio terrace, the sound amplifying like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. The reaction was instantaneous. Alistair flinched violently. He dropped his champagne glass, the crystal shattering on the paved path. He crouched, his body curling inward, his hands coming up as if to ward off a blow. His eyes went wide and vacant, staring at something thousands of miles and 10 years away. He wasn't in Richmond. He was in Badajoz. He was in hell. People turned. Whispers started. "The War Duke? Mad! Look at him!" Isabel didn't think. She didn't care about the eyes of the ton. She moved. She stepped directly in front of him, blocking him from the view of the curious crowd. She knelt in the grass, indifferent to the grass stains on her expensive gown, and took his face in her hands. "Alistair," she said firmly, "look at me." He was trembling, a fine, high-frequency vibration that shook his entire frame. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. He didn't see her. "They are flanking us," he muttered, his voice unrecognizable. "Get the men down, the artillery—" "No," Isabel said, keeping her voice low and steady. She pressed her thumbs against his cheekbones, anchoring him. "There is no artillery. You are in Richmond. The war is over. You are safe." The screams. "Listen to me," she commanded. "Listen to my voice. You are Alistair Navar. You are safe. I am here. Isabel is here." Slowly, painfully, the haze began to clear. His eyes focused on hers. He blinked, taking a shuddering breath. He looked down at her hands on his face, then at the shattered glass, then at the crowd peering at them with morbid fascination. Humiliation washed over his face, followed immediately by the icy mask of the Duke. He started to pull away. Forgive me, I have disgraced myself." "You have done no such thing," she whispered fiercely, refusing to let him go until he was steady. "You survived. That is not a disgrace." He looked at her with a vulnerability that broke her heart. "I am broken, Isabel. You see it now. I am a shattered thing." "You are not broken," she said, her thumb brushing a bead of sweat from his temple. "You are wounded. Wounds heal, and even if they leave scars, I do not mind scars. He stared at her, and in that moment the connection between them shifted from attraction to something far more profound. He wasn't just the exciting, dangerous lover. He was a man in pain, and she wanted, more than anything, to be the one to soothe him. "Stand up with me," she said, softly. "Take my arm. We will walk away, and we will not give a damn what they think." He took a breath, nodded, and rose. He offered her his arm. It was shaking slightly, but his head was high. "Thank you," he grit out. "Do not thank me," she replied, placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. "Just hold on to me." The opera. The climax of his campaign came 3 nights before the wedding. The venue was the King's Theatre. The opera was Mozart's Don Giovanni. Philip had escorted her naturally, but he had practically fallen asleep during the first act. "Terrible screeching," he had muttered, "and the morality of the plot is highly questionable." During the intermission, Philip excused himself. "I must find Lord Liverpool. We need to discuss the parliamentary vote. I shall return shortly. Do not wander." Isabel sat alone in the velvet-lined box, watching the gaslights dim as the second act began. The music swelled, dark and seductive. The curtain to the box swept aside. She didn't turn. She knew the scent of him, sandalwood and cold night air. He slipped into the chair beside her, sitting deep in the shadows where the rest of the theatre couldn't see him. "Bramfield left you alone," Alistair's voice whispered against the nape of her neck. "A tactical error." "He is discussing politics," Isabel whispered back, clutching her fan. Her heart was hammering so loud she feared it would drown out the orchestra. "While a man on stage is dragged to hell for his passions," Alistair murmured. "Fitting." On stage, the baritone sang of seduction, of a hunger that consumed everything in its path. The music was a physical force, wrapping around them in the dark. "Look at them, Isabel," Alistair said, gesturing vaguely to the audience below. "Sitting in their rows, pretending to be shocked, but they love it. They love the danger because it is the only time they are allowed to feel anything." He moved his hand. It covered hers, where it rested on the velvet armrest. His palm was hot, his fingers calloused. He didn't grip her, he just rested his hand there, a heavy, undeniable claim. "Philip says the morality is questionable," she managed to say, her breath hitching. "Philip wants a world without edges," Alistair countered. He leaned closer, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "He wants you to be a porcelain doll, smooth, cold, empty." He turned her hand over, interlacing their fingers. The sensation was shockingly intimate. "I know the truth," he whispered. "I know you burn, Isabel. I can feel it in your skin. I can see it in the way you look at me when you think no one is watching." "Alistair, stop." "Why? Because it is true?" His grip tightened. "You are terrified. You should be. What we have, it destroys things. It burns down houses and reputations, but it is real. Can you honestly say you would prefer a lifetime of sleep to one moment of this?" On stage, Don Giovanni shouted his defiance. The music crashed and soared. "I love you," Alistair said. The words were dropped into the darkness like stones into a deep well. Isabel stopped breathing. He hadn't said it before. He had spoken of want, of need, of freedom, but not this. "I love your mind," he continued, relentless. "I love your anger. I love the way you rode that mare at dawn. I love you, Isabel Montford, and I'm asking you, begging you, not to throw your life away on a man who will never know the color of your soul." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to the center of her palm that seared straight to her heart. "3 days," he whispered. "Don't do it." The door to the box clicked. Alistair released her hand instantly, leaning back into the shadows just as Philip bustled back in, looking pleased with himself. "Caught Liverpool just in time," Philip announced, sitting heavily. "Missed." Anything important? Isabel stared at the stage, her vision blurred by tears she refused to shed. She could still feel the phantom warmth of Alistair's hand on hers. She could still hear the echo of his confession. "No, Philip," she choked out. "Nothing important." The realization. That night, Isabel stood in her bedroom at Hawkston House. Her wedding dress hung on the wardrobe door, a ghost of ivory silk and Brussels lace. It was beautiful, it was expensive, it was a shroud. She paced the floor, Alistair's words looping in her mind. "I love you. I am broken. You saved me." She thought of Philip. She thought of his kindness, his talk of drainage, his utter inability to understand why she cried at music or why she needed to run. He wasn't a bad man, that was the tragedy of it. If he were a villain, this would be easy, but he was just wrong. He was a comfortable shoe that didn't fit, causing a blister that would eventually become gangrenous. And then she thought of Alistair, the way he shook after the loud noise at the party, the way he looked at her, like she was the sun breaking through a 10-year winter, the way she felt when she was with him, capable, dangerous, alive. She stopped pacing. She looked at herself in the mirror. "I love him," she whispered to the empty room. The truth didn't liberate her, it terrified her. To choose Alistair was to choose ruin. It meant humiliating Philip publicly. It meant her father's wrath. It meant being the subject of gossip for the rest of her life. But to choose Philip. She looked at the wedding dress again. To choose Philip was to commit suicide. Not quickly, but slowly. Inch by inch, day by day, until the Isabel who rode races at dawn and argued about steam engines was dead, replaced by a hollow shell who poured tea and discussed the weather. She sank onto the floor, burying her face in her hands. She knew what she had to do, and the knowledge broke her heart. "I cannot marry him," she sobbed into the silence. "God help me, I cannot marry him." The clock on the mantelpiece ticked loudly. 2 days. The father's. Suspicion. The summons came at breakfast the next morning. It was delivered by the butler, staring straight ahead, his voice void of inflection. "His lordship wishes to see you in his study, Lady Isabel, immediately." Isabel set down her teacup. The china rattled against the saucer, a tiny, treacherous sound that betrayed her calm facade. "Thank you, Peters." She walked through the corridors of Hawkstone House like a prisoner walking to the gallows. The house, usually a symbol of her security, now felt like a fortress built to keep her in. When she entered the study, the smell of beeswax and stale cigar smoke hit her, the scent of her father's authority. The Earl of Hawkstone stood by the window, his back to the room. He did not turn when the door clicked shut. "Sit down, Isabel." She sat on the edge of the high-backed leather chair, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "Do you take me for a fool, daughter?" The Earl turned then. His face was not red with rage, which would have been manageable. It was pale, cold, and hard as granite. "I do not know what you mean, Papa. Do not lie to me." He moved to his desk, picking up a sheaf of papers, invitations, bills, the detritus of their aristocratic life. "I have eyes. I have ears. The entire ton is whispering. The Duke of Blackthorne follows you like a shadow. He accosts you in the park. He creates scenes on garden parties. And you," he slammed the papers down, "you allow it." "He is a friend," Isabel defended, her voice thin. "He is a war hero who finds himself lonely in London." "He is a predator," the Earl snapped, "and you are the prey. Do not mistake his obsession for affection, Isabel. Men like Blackthorne, broken men, violent men, they do not know how to love. They only know how to conquer." "He is not broken," she said, surprised by her own boldness. "He is healing, and he treats me with more respect than Lord Bramfield." Her father's laugh was harsh. "Philip Bramfield offers you a title, a fortune, and a respectable lineage. Blackthorne offers you scandal, ruin. Do you—" Understand what happens if you continue this flirtation. The Bramfields will withdraw. Your reputation will be shredded. No decent family will receive you. He walked around the desk, leaning down until he was eye level with her. I forbid it, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You are confined to this house until the ball at Bramfield House. Tomorrow night you will not ride, you will not receive callers, and you will certainly not see the Duke of Blackthorne. You will marry Philip on Saturday, and you will thank me for saving you from your own foolishness. Isabel stared at him. For the first time she saw not just her father, but the bars of the cage. He didn't care about her heart. He cared about the integrity of the Hawkstone name. As you wish, Papa, she whispered. Good. He straightened up, dismissing her. Go to your room. You have a wedding to prepare for. The mother's confession. Isabel spent the day in her room, pacing the floor until her legs ached. She felt suffocated. The walls seemed to be closing in, inch by inch. Late that afternoon, the door opened. She expected Sarah with a tray of food she couldn't eat. Instead, it was her mother. The Countess of Hawkstone closed the door quietly and locked it. Isabel froze. Mamma? Margaret Montford walked to the window, looking out at the grey London sky. She looked tired. The perfect mask of the society hostess had slipped, revealing a woman who was weary of the game. Your father is furious, Margaret said softly. He believes you are throwing away a diamond to pick up a piece of coal. And you? Isabel asked, her voice trembling. Do you agree? Margaret turned. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her for a long moment. Then she walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. Sit, Isabel. Isabel sat. Her mother took her hands. Margaret's hands were cool, soft, and smelled of rosewater. I married your father when I was 18, Margaret said. It was a good match. He was wealthy, titled, and not unkind. We have had a good life. I have lacked for nothing. No, Mamma, but, Margaret continued, her grip tightening, it has been a quiet life, a cold life sometimes. Your father is a good man, but he does not burn, Isabel. He is earth, and I have learned to be content with the ground. She reached up and touched Isabel's cheek. But you have always been fire. I tried to tamp it. Down. I laced your corsets tight. I taught you to be silent. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I could make you like me, you would be safe. Tears welled in Isabel's eyes. Mamma, I see the way you look at the Duke, Margaret whispered. And I see the way he looks at you. It frightens me. It is dangerous. It is everything we are. Taught to avoid. She paused, her blue eyes searching Isabel's face. But I wonder what it would have been like if I had chosen the fire. Isabel's breath hitched. What are you saying? I am saying that safety is a comfortable place to die, Isabel, but it is not a place to live. Margaret stood up, smoothing her skirts, the mask, sliding back into place. I cannot stop your father. I cannot stop the wedding, but I will not tell you that you are wrong to want more. You must decide what you can live with, my darling, the regret of a mistake made, or the regret of a path not taken. She kissed Isabel's forehead. Be brave, whatever you choose. When the door clicked shut, again, Isabel sat on the bed, stunned. Her mother hadn't given her permission to rebel. That would be impossible, but she had given her something far more dangerous. Validation. The pre-wedding ball. The Bramfield Ball was the event of the season. It was intended to be the victory lap for the union of two great houses. The ballroom was a sea of flowers, crystal, and hundreds of guests eager to celebrate the happy couple. Isabel stood at the top of the receiving line, a smile plastered onto her face that felt like it was carved from wood. She hated her dress. It was a pale, icy blue silk, chosen by Philip's mother because it suggested purity and obedience. It was tight across the chest, and heavy with beaded embroidery. She felt like a decorative object, a piece of expensive china put on display. "Lady Isabel, so happy for you! A perfect match! You must be thrilled!" Isabel nodded. She curtsied. She said, "Thank you," 100 times, until the words lost all meaning. Beside her, Philip was in his element. He looked handsome in his evening clothes, beaming with pride. He introduced her to cousins and business partners, discussing the wedding arrangements with a proprietary air that made Isabel's skin crawl. "We have decided on the Lake District for the honeymoon," Philip told a group of gentlemen. "Very scenic, quiet, good for walking." He hadn't asked her. He had decided. Just as he had decided on the house renovations, the horses, the names of their future children. The room was hot, overbearingly, stiflingly hot. The smell of perfume and sweat and burning wax was making her dizzy. "Philip," she touched his arm, "I need air." "Not now, my dear," he whispered, smiling at a duchess. "Lady Jersey is approaching. We must be polite." "I cannot breathe," she said, louder this time. "Just a moment longer," he hissed, his grip on her arm tightening slightly. "Control yourself, Isabel. People are watching." Control yourself. That was it, the final straw. Isabel pulled her arm free. "Excuse me," she said to Lady Jersey, not caring that she was interrupting. She turned and walked away. She didn't walk toward the ladies' retiring room. She walked straight for the French doors that led to the terrace. She heard Philip call her name, but she didn't stop. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the night. The terrace scene. The air was cold and clean. Isabel walked to the stone balustrade, gripping the rough surface, dragging air into her starved lungs. Below, the gardens were dark and silent. Behind her, the music and laughter of the ball sounded like a roar from another world. "You look like a prisoner, contemplating a jailbreak." The voice came from the shadows at the far end of the terrace. Isabel didn't jump. She had known somehow that he would be here. Alistair stepped into the moonlight. He was not wearing the formal evening dress of the other guests. He wore his severe black coat, looking like a shadow that had taken human form. He looked tired, his eyes burning with a frantic, desperate energy. "Alistair," she breathed, "you should not be here. My father." "Your father cannot keep me away," he said, walking toward her. "Not tonight, not when you are standing on the edge." He stopped a few feet from her. He looked at the blue dress. "That color does not suit you. It is too cold. You should wear red or green, something alive." "It is what Philip wanted," she said dully. "And is this what you want?" He gestured to the ballroom behind the glass doors, the receiving line, the polite conversation, the slow suffocation. "I have a duty," she recited, the words tasting like ash. "Contracts are signed." "Damn the contracts," Alistair swore softly. "Look at me, Isabel." He stepped closer, invading her space, forcing her to tilt her head. "Back." "I am leaving," he said. Isabel's heart stopped. "What?" "If you marry him on Saturday, I cannot stay in England. I cannot be in the same country as you, knowing you are in his bed, bearing his children, slowly fading away until there is nothing left of the woman I love. I will return to the continent, or perhaps the Americas." "You would." "Leave me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I would leave to save my own sanity," he said, his voice rough with pain. "But I am giving you a choice, right now, tonight." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, calloused, real. "Walk away with me now. Down those stairs into the garden. My carriage is waiting on the side street. We will go to Blackthorne Abbey. We will marry by special license. We will create a scandal that will burn for a decade. Alistair, or," he continued, relentless, "go back inside. Take Bramfield's hand. Marry him. Be safe. Be respectable. Be the countess your father wants you to be. He squeezed her hand, then loosened his grip. But do not lie to me. Isabel, do not tell me you love him. Look me in the eye and tell me you want this life, and I will let you go. I will walk away and never shadow your door again. Isabel looked at him. She saw the vulnerability behind the challenge. He wasn't commanding her, he was offering her a lifeline. He was the only person in the world who was asking her what she wanted. I cannot say I love him, she whispered, because I don't. Then why are you still standing here? Because I am afraid, she cried softly. I am afraid of the ruin. I am afraid of my father's hate. I am afraid that I will destroy everything. You will destroy the cage, Alistair said, and yes, it will be terrifying, but I will be there. I will stand between you and the world. I will take the hatred. I will take the scandal. All you have to do is take my hand. The last dance. From inside the ballroom, the orchestra began a new song. It was a waltz, slow, mournful, and beautiful. Alistair looked at the glass doors, then back at her. One dance, he said. Dance with me, Isabel, here, in the dark, where no one can see us, where no one can judge us. Alistair, if we are seen, let them see. He bowed, formal and elegant. May I have this dance, Lady Isabel? Isabel looked at the ballroom where Philip was likely searching for her, annoyed that she was disrupting his schedule. Then she looked at Alistair. Offering her his hand in the moonlight, she placed her hand in his. He pulled her close, his arm circling her waist, pulling her against his chest. They began to move. It was not a proper waltz. There was no respectful distance between them. They were pressed together from chest to thigh. Isabel could feel the beat of his heart against her own. She could smell the soap and sandalwood and the scent of him. They spun slowly in the darkness, moving to the music that drifted through the glass. I love you, he whispered against her hair. I love your courage. I love your fear. I love all of it. Isabel closed her eyes. For the first time in months, the noise in her head stopped. The fear of her. Father, the guilt about Philip, the pressure of society, it all fell away. There was only this, the man holding her, the rhythm of the music, the feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be. She thought of her mother's words, the regret of a path not taken. She realized she could survive scandal, she could survive poverty, she could survive her father's anger, but she could not survive losing this. She could not survive a life without Alistair Navar. The music swelled to a crescendo. Alistair spun her, and for a moment they were flying. When the music stopped, they didn't pull apart. They stood in the silence of the terrace, breathing together. Alistair looked down at her, his question unspoken but loud in his eyes. Well? Isabel took a deep breath. She felt the cold air fill her lungs, sharp and clarifying. She looked at the glass doors, at the prison of gold and silk waiting for her. Then she looked at the dark garden and the man who offered her the world. I cannot go back in there, she said. Her voice was steady. I cannot marry him, Alistair. Relief broke across his face like a sunrise, blinding and beautiful. You mean it? I mean it. She gripped his lapels. I choose you. I choose the fire. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and kissed her. It was a kiss of victory, of salvation. Then let us go, he said, taking her hand firmly in his. Let us give them a scandal they will never forget. Not tonight, she said, pulling back slightly. I will not run away in the night like a thief. I will not let them say you stole me. Alistair frowned. Isabel. I will do this properly, she said, her chin coming up. I will face them. I will tell Philip the truth. I will tell my father. I will break the engagement with my head high. They will try to stop you. They will use guilt, force. Let them try, she said, and her eyes flashed with the same dangerous light that was in his. I am not the girl I was yesterday. I am the woman who loves the Duke of Blackthorne, and I am done being afraid." Alistair studied her, pride warring with worry in his gaze. Finally he nodded. "Tomorrow then," he said, "I will wait for word. But if you do not come to me by noon, I am coming for you, and I will bring the stallion." Isabel smiled. "By noon, I promise." She stepped back, smoothing her icy blue dress. "Now, I must go back in there and finish this masquerade. Last night in the cage." "One last night," he echoed. He kissed her hand. "Be brave, my Duchess." Isabel turned and walked back toward the light and the noise. But she walked differently now. Her stride was longer. Her spine was steel. She wasn't walking into a prison. She was walking into the arena to say goodbye. The sleepless night Isabel did not sleep. Sleep belonged to the innocent and the content, and she was neither. She lay in her bed at Hawkstone House, listening to the wind rattle the sash windows, watching the darkness of her room slowly turn to the grey, bruised purple of pre-dawn. Every hour that passed was a physical weight. She rehearsed the words in her mind until they lost all meaning. "I cannot marry him. I will not marry him. I love another." They sounded melodramatic in the silence of her room, like lines from a bad play. But they were the only weapons she had. She looked around the room where she had grown up. The wallpaper with its pattern of climbing roses, the vanity table where she had sat for hours while Sarah brushed her hair, the window seat where she had read novels and dreamed of a life that looked nothing like the one she was scheduled to begin on Saturday. She was saying goodbye. She knew, with a terrifying clarity, that once she said what she needed to say, she would never sleep in this room again. She was about to burn down the only home she had ever known. At 6 o'clock, the house began to stir. The distant sound of the scullery maids, the creak of floorboards. Isabel rose. She dressed herself in a simple morning gown of dove-grey wool, unadorned and severe. She braided her own hair, pinning it back tightly. She looked in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed, but her jaw was set. She didn't look like a bride. She looked like a soldier going to a court-martial. The lion's den. The Earl of Hawkstone was a creature of habit. At 7 o'clock precisely, he would be in his study with a pot of strong tea and the morning correspondence. Isabel knocked on the heavy oak door at 7:15. "Enter!" She stepped inside. Her father was seated behind his massive mahogany desk, a letter opener in his hand. He looked up, and his eyebrows drew together. "Isabel, you are up early. I assumed you would sleep until noon after the ball." "I could not sleep, Papa." He gestured vaguely to the chair opposite him, not looking up from the letter he was slicing open. "Nerves, it is to be expected. Your mother was a bundle of nerves before our wedding. It passes." "It is not nerves." Isabel remained standing. She gripped the back of the leather chair, her knuckles white. "I need to speak with you, Papa, and I need you to listen." Something in her tone, a hardness he had never heard before, made the Earl set down the letter opener. He leaned back, studying her with cold grey eyes. "Very well. Speak." Isabel took a breath. It felt like inhaling broken glass. "I cannot marry Lord Bramfield." The silence that followed was absolute. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner sounded like a hammer striking an anvil. The Earl didn't blink. He didn't shout. He simply stared at her, his face completely void of expression. "You cannot," he repeated flatly, "or you will not." "I will not," she corrected, her voice shaking slightly. "I cannot stand before God and vow to love and honor a man I feel nothing for. It would be a lie. It would be a sin." "A sin," her father scoffed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Do not preach. In theology to me, girl, this is about the Duke, isn't it?" "It is about the truth," she said. "Yes, I love the Duke, and he loves me. But even if he did not exist, I could not marry Philip. I realized that last night. I would rather be alone for the rest of my life than live in the cage you have built for me." The Earl stood up. He moved slowly, deliberately. "You speak of cages," he said, his voice rising in volume. "I have given you the finest life in England. I have secured your future with a man of wealth and impeccable standing, and you wish to throw it away for a damaged, unstable soldier who has bewitched you with stories of woe." "He is not unstable," Isabel cried. "He is the most honest man I have ever met. He sees me, Papa. Philip sees an ornament. Alistair sees a partner." "Alistair," the Earl mocked. "This is with ruin, I see." He slammed his hand down on the desk. The inkwell rattled. "Do you have any conception of what you are doing? The invitations are sent, the church is booked, the settlements are signed. If you break this engagement 2 days before the wedding, you disgrace us all. You humiliate the Bramfields. You taint your sister's prospects. You make the name Montford a laughingstock." "I know," she whispered. "I know the cost, and I am willing to pay it." "You?" Her father laughed, a cruel barking sound. "You have never paid for anything in your life. I pay. The family pays. You are a selfish, spoiled child playing at tragedy." He walked around the desk and stood in front of her, his face twisted with a fury she had never seen. "I will not allow it. You will go to your room. You will remain there until Saturday, and you will be carried to the altar if I have to bind your hands and feet." "No," Isabel said. She let go of the chair and stood tall. "I am 22 years old. I am not a chattel to be traded. If you force me to the altar, I will say no in front of the priest. I will say no in front of the king himself. I will not marry him." They stared at each other, a battle of wills between two, people who shared the same stubborn blood. "If you walk out of this engagement," the Earl said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was far more terrifying than his shouting, "you walk out of this family. I will not support you. I will not acknowledge you. You will not have a penny of my money, and you will not be welcome in my home." "I understand," Isabel said, tears blurring her vision. "You will be dead to me." The words hit her like a physical blow. She swayed, but she didn't fall. "Then I grieve for us both," she said softly, "because I love you, Papa, but I cannot die for you." "Get out!" he rasped, turning his back on her. "Get out of my sight!" The unexpected ally Isabel fled the study. She ran up the stairs, blinded by tears, gasping for air. She burst into her room and began to pull her trunk from the corner. She threw clothes into it haphazardly. Her riding habit, a few day dresses, her books. She didn't take the jewels. She didn't take the silk ball gowns. Those belonged to Lady Isabel Montford, the Earl's daughter. She was becoming someone else now. "Isabel?" She spun around. Her mother stood in the doorway. Isabel froze, clutching a copy of Rights of Man to her chest. "Mama, I am leaving. Papa said—" "I know what your father said. I could hear him from the breakfast room." Margaret Montford walked into the room. She looked at the chaotic trunk, the scattered clothes, the tear-streaked face of her daughter. Isabel braced herself for the scolding, for the plea to be reasonable. Instead, Margaret reached out and gently took the book from Isabel's hands, placing it neatly in the trunk. "You will need warm stockings," her mother said quietly. "Derbyshire is cold in the spring." Isabel stared at her. "Mama!" Margaret turned to the wardrobe. She began to pull out practical items, wool shawls, sturdy boots, and fold them with the efficiency of a general packing for a campaign. "I told you yesterday," Margaret said, not looking at Isabel. "I made my choice. I chose the ground, but watching you fight for the fire." Her voice cracked. She paused, taking a deep breath. "I am proud of you." "Proud," Isabel sobbed. "I have ruined everything." "You have dismantled a facade," Margaret corrected, turning to face her. "It is messy. It is painful. Your father is hurting, and he is lashing out because he is afraid for you. But you are brave, Isabel, braver than I ever was. She walked over and pulled Isabel into a fierce embrace. It wasn't the polite side hug of society, it was a mother holding her child. Go to him, Margaret whispered into her hair. Go to your Duke, be happy, live a life that makes this mess worth it. She pulled back, pressing a small, heavy velvet pouch into Isabel's hand. My private funds, she said. Your father cannot touch them. It isn't a fortune, but it will keep you from being destitute if things are difficult at first. I cannot take this. You can, and you will. Margaret wiped Isabel's tears with her thumb. Now finish packing. The carriage is ordered. I told the driver to take you to Bramfield House first. Isabel looked at her mother with awe. You ordered the carriage. I am the Countess of Hawkstone, Margaret said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I may have chosen the ground, but I still run this house. Go, my darling, before your father comes upstairs. The drawing room. The ride to Bramfield House felt like a funeral procession. Isabel sat alone. In the carriage, her trunk strapped to the back, the velvet pouch heavy in her pocket. When she arrived, the butler looked surprised to see her so early and without a maid. Is Lord Bramfield at home? He is in the breakfast room, my lady. Shall I announce you? No, Isabel said. I will announce myself. She found Philip alone, eating toast and reading the Times. He looked so normal, so safe. He looked up as she entered, a smile brightening his face. Isabel, what a delightful surprise. I didn't expect to see you until... He stopped. He saw her face. The smile slid off his features like wax melting. Isabel. He stood up, dropping his napkin. What has happened? Is it your father? Philip, she said, stopping in the center of the room. She couldn't go closer. She couldn't let him touch her. We need to talk. You look pale, he fretted, moving toward her. Sit down, I'll ring for tea. No tea, Philip, please. She held up a hand to stop him. I need to tell you something, and it is going to hurt. I am so desperately sorry. But I cannot marry you. Philip froze. He looked at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. I don't understand, he said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. Is this a joke? Cold feet? Mother said you might be nervous. It is not nerves, she said clearly. I am breaking the engagement, Philip. Breaking. He blinked rapidly. But the wedding is in 2 days. The guests. I know. Is it something I have done? He looked genuinely bewildered, and that hurt more than anger. The house? I can change the architects. If you don't like the morning room. It isn't the room, Philip. She took a step forward, desperate to make him understand. It isn't you. You are. Perfect. You are kind and good and generous, but I do not love you, he recoiled. You do not love me. I care for you, she said. I have always cared for you, but I do not love you the way a wife should love a husband, and you do not love me. Of course I love you, he protested, his face flushing. We have been betrothed for 10 years. You are my intended. I am your intended, she agreed. I'm a part of your plan. You love the idea of me. You love that I am suitable, that I am a Montford. But do you know me, Philip? Do you know what I read? Do you know that I hate embroidery? Do you know that I dream of steam engines and wild horses? He stared at her. Steam engines. You see, she said sadly, we are strangers. We would have been polite strangers, living in the same house for 50 years. We would have been content, perhaps. But I cannot settle for content. Not any more. It is him, isn't it? Philip's voice went cold. The Duke. Isabel didn't deny it. Yes, I saw the way he looked at you, Philip muttered, turning. A way to look at the cold fireplace. I thought it was just lust. I thought you were too sensible to be swayed by a dark look and a scar. I love him, Isabel said. I am sorry. Philip stood in silence for a long time. She watched his shoulders rise and fall. When he turned back, his face was composed, but his eyes were wet. I thought I was Enough, he said quietly. I thought a good life, a safe life, was what you wanted. It was, she admitted, until I learned that I could breathe fire. Philip straightened his waistcoat. He sought refuge in his dignity, the only thing he had left. Very well, he said stiffly. If you are determined to ruin yourself, I cannot stop you. I will not hold you to a promise you made as a child. Thank you, Philip. Do not thank me, he snapped, the hurt flashing through. You have humiliated me, Isabel. You have made me a cuckold before I was even a husband. I will release you, but do not expect my friendship. That is done. The Bramfield wrath. What is the meaning of this? The sharp voice cut through the air. Lady Bramfield stood in the doorway wearing a dressing gown of purple silk, looking like an vengeful empress. She had clearly been listening. Mother, Philip said wearily, Isabel is leaving. Leaving? Lady Bramfield swept into the room. She looked at Isabel with pure, unadulterated loathing. You little fool, do you have any idea what you have done? I have told the truth, Isabel said, meeting the older woman's gaze. The truth? Lady Bramfield scoffed. You are a selfish, spoiled girl who has been seduced by a title and a reputation for danger. You think this is romantic? It is grotesque. Mother, please, Philip tried to intervene. No, Philip, she needs to hear it. She stepped close to Isabel, smelling of heavy powder and bitterness. You are ruined, Lady Isabel. When this news breaks, no door in London will open to you. You will be a pariah. And when your Duke tires of you, and he will, men like that always do, you will have nothing, no family, no friends, no future. I will have myself, Isabel said, her voice shaking but firm, and that is more than I would have had here. Get out! Lady Bramfield pointed a shaking finger at the door. Leave my house, and pray we never cross paths again, for I will cut you dead in the street. Isabel looked at Philip one last time. He was studying the carpet, unable to look at her. Goodbye, Philip, she whispered. I hope you find someone who loves you for you, not for the alliance. She turned and walked out of the breakfast room, past the furious matriarch, down the hall, and out the front door. She stepped onto the pavement of Mayfair. The carriage with her trunk was waiting. She felt light, dizzyingly, terrifyingly light, the heavy ropes that had bound her to this life, the expectations, the duty, the fear, had been severed. She was adrift. But as she looked up at the sky, where the sun was finally breaking through the clouds, she realized she wasn't just adrift, she was sailing. She climbed into the carriage. Where to, my lady? The driver asked. Isabel took a deep breath. Grosvenor Square, she said. The Duke of Blackthorne's residence. The carriage lurched forward. Isabel didn't look back at the Bramfield house. She looked forward toward the ruin, toward the scandal, toward the love that was waiting to catch her. The flight to the wolf's den. The carriage ride from Bramfield House to Grosvenor Square was short, spanning less than a mile of physical distance, but crossing an ocean of social consequence. With every turn of the wheel, Isabel felt the threads of her old life snapping. She was no longer the enviable Lady Isabel, future Baroness. She was a runaway, a spectacle, a woman who had detonated her own future. When the carriage halted before the imposing stone, a facade of Blackthorne House, Isabel peered out the window. The house was dark, brooding, and shuttered against the street, a fortress in the middle of polite society. It looked exactly like its master. The driver, looking uneasy about depositing a lady and her trunk at a bachelor's residence without a chaperone, climbed down slowly. He knocked on the heavy black door. It opened almost immediately. A butler appeared, an older man, with a face like a crumpled map and eyes that had seen everything. He looked from the carriage to the trunk, then to Isabel descending the steps. His eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the only sign of shock he permitted himself. "Good morning," Isabel said. Her. his voice steady, though her knees knocked together. "Is his grace at home?" "He is, my lady," the butler replied, his tone perfectly neutral. "He is in the library. He was not expecting callers." "He is expecting me," Isabel corrected. "Or at least he is hoping for me." "I see." The butler signaled to a footman to take the trunk. "Please, come in." Out of the cold. Crossing the threshold of Blackthorne House felt like stepping into a different world. Where Hawkstone House was all cream and gold and superficial light, this house was shadow and mahogany. It smelled of beeswax, old leather, and silence. It felt masculine and safe. "I shall inform his grace," the butler said. "No need." A rough voice came from the top of the stairs. Isabel looked up. Alistair stood on the landing. He looked wrecked. He was still wearing the clothes from the night before. The severe black coat now rumpled, his cravat untied and hanging loose around his neck. His hair was disordered, as if he had been running his hands through it for hours. There was a glass of amber liquid in his hand, and his eyes were bleak, staring at the floor. Then he saw her. The glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered on the hardwood floor, sending a spray of whiskey and crystal across the landing. He didn't even flinch. "Isabel?" He breathed her name as if he were seeing a ghost. "I told you," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "I promised I would come by noon." The reunion. He moved. He came down the stairs not with the grace of a courtier, but with the speed of a soldier reaching for a weapon. He cleared the distance between them in seconds. He didn't ask questions. He didn't care about the butler or the footman or the shattered glass. He pulled her into his arms with a force that knocked the breath out of her. Isabel buried her face in his chest, smelling the whiskey and the stale smoke and the warm, living scent of him. She began to shake. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation with her father and Philip suddenly drained away, leaving her weak. "You came," he murmured into her hair, his arms banding around her so tightly her ribs ached. "God, Isabel, you came." "I broke it," she sobbed, clutching his lapels. "I broke everything. Philip, my father. They hate me, Alistair. I have burned it all down." "Let it burn," he swore fiercely. "Let it all turn to ash. You are here. You are safe." He pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumbs wiping away the tears that were spilling over. His eyes searched hers, looking for regret, looking for hesitation. "Did you tell him?" "I told him I did not love him," she said. "I told him I chose the fire." Alistair closed his eyes, resting his forehead against hers. A shudder went through him, a release of tension so profound she could feel it in his bones. "I was preparing to ride to Bramfield House," he admitted, his voice rough. "I was going to kick down the door. I was terrified they had talked you out of it, that they had forced you back into the cage." "My mother helped me pack," Isabel whispered. "She gave me money. She told me to go to you." Alistair let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Remind me to kiss the Countess's hand if I am ever permitted in her presence again." He looked up at the butler, who was studiously examining a painting on the far wall. "Henderson." "Your Grace, Lady Isabel is staying. Prepare the blue room and send a message to the stables. I want the carriage ready for travel at dawn tomorrow." "Travel, Your Grace. We are going to Derbyshire." Alistair looked back at Isabel, his gaze possessive and tender. "We are going home." The sanctuary. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended twilight. Isabel felt as though she were floating. The reality of what she had done, the magnitude of the scandal that was currently erupting across London, felt distant, like a storm raging in another country. Alistair did not leave her side. He led her to the library, a vast, high-ceilinged room, lined with books from floor to ceiling. He sat her in a leather armchair near the fire and wrapped a heavy wool blanket around her shoulders. He poured her tea. He fed her biscuits. He treated her as if she were a soldier recovering from a brutal campaign. "You are shaking," he observed, kneeling before her to chafe her cold hands. "I keep hearing Lady Bramfield's voice," Isabel admitted, staring into the flames. "She said I am ruined. She said I will be a pariah. She is." "Right," Alistair said. Isabel looked at him, startled by his bluntness. "I will not lie to you, Isabel. I promised you honesty. By the standards of this society, you are ruined. Breaking an engagement days before the wedding, running to the home of a bachelor, it is social suicide. The doors of Mayfair will be closed to us." He squeezed her hands. "Does that frighten you?" "Yes," she whispered. "It terrifies me." "Good. It should." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. "But listen to me. Their doors are closed, but the world is wide. We have Blackthorne Abbey, we have the Moors, we have Paris, Rome, Vienna, if you wish it. We do not need their permission to live, Isabel. We only need each other." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. "I obtained this 3 days ago," he said, handing it to her. Isabel unfolded the heavy paper. It was a special license from the Archbishop of Canterbury, granting permission for the Duke of Blackthorne to marry Isabel Charlotte Montford. Without the reading of banns, she ran her finger over her name. "You were so certain." "I was hopeful," he corrected, "and desperate. I carried it with me everywhere, a talisman against the darkness." He took the paper back and set it on the table. "We will marry tomorrow morning," he stated, "here in London. There is a small church in Clerkenwell. St. James. The vicar served as a chaplain in my regiment. He owes me a favour, and he does not care for gossip. Henderson and your mother's friend, Lady Caroline, was it, can stand as witnesses if you can reach her. If not, Henderson and the clerk will suffice. Tomorrow," Isabel breathed. "Not the ivory dress, not the cathedral." "No," Alistair said, "just us and the truth, the social fallout." While Isabel sat by the fire in the sanctuary of Blackthorne House, the storm outside broke. The news travelled through London with the speed of a virus. Servants talked. Philip's valet told the scullery maid, who told the baker's boy, who told the delivery man. By tea-time the rumours were swirling. In every drawing-room, "Lady Isabel has fled. The Bramfield engagement is broken. She is with the War Duke." Notes began to arrive at Grosvenor Square. Not for Isabel, she no longer existed to them, but for the Duke. Alistair intercepted them all. He stood by the window, reading the wax-sealed condemnations from society matrons and the furious demands for explanation from Philip's relatives. He threw them one by one into the fire. "Bad news?" Isabel asked, watching the paper curl and blacken. "Irrelevant news," Alistair said, watching the flames devour the insults. "The buzzing of flies." He turned to her. "Caroline Ashford has sent a reply to my messenger. She will be at the church tomorrow. She says she would not miss it for the world, and she brings her husband's pistols in case anyone tries to stop us." Isabel laughed. It was a weak, watery sound, but it was real. "She is a good friend." "She is the only friend you need," Alistair said. The rest were merely audience members. The secret wedding dawn broke grey and weeping over London. It was fitting weather for a scandal, Isabel thought as she dressed. She wore the same dove-grey wool dress she had worn to break her engagement. It was simple, unadorned, and practical. It was the dress of a woman who was done performing. Alistair waited for her in the hall. He had shaved and changed into fresh clothes, a dark blue coat and high boots. He looked sharp, dangerous, and devastatingly handsome. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand. "Ready?" They took a hackney coach to avoid recognition. The church of St. James was small, old, and smelled of damp stone and incense. It was empty, save for the vicar, a man with a wooden leg and a kind face, and Caroline Ashford, who rushed. forward to embrace Isabel the moment she stepped inside. "Oh, you brave mad girl," Caroline whispered, squeezing her tight. "You actually did it." "I did," Isabel said, clinging to her friend. "Is it terrible out there?" "It is chaos." Caroline grinned wickedly. "Lady Bramfield has taken to her bed with smelling salts. Your father is refusing all egg callers. It is the most excitement London has seen since the Jubilee. I am overwhelmingly jealous." "We are ready," the vicar announced, limping to the altar. There was no music, no choir, no procession. Isabel stood beside Alistair at the altar rail. The church was cold, their breath misting in the air, but Alistair's hand holding hers was burning hot. They spoke the vows. "I, Alistair, take thee, Isabel." His voice was deep and steady, echoing off the stone walls. He spoke the words not as a ritual, but as an oath, a binding blood pact. "I, Isabel, take thee, Alistair." Her voice wavered, but she forced it to steady. She looked at him, at the scars, the darkness, the hope. She wasn't marrying a title. She was marrying a man. "With this ring I thee wed." He slid a ring onto her finger. It wasn't the heavy diamond Philip had given her. It was a band of gold, inset with a single dark sapphire that looked almost black in the dim light. "It belonged to my grandmother," he whispered. "She was a difficult woman who loved her. Husband to distraction, it suits you." "I pronounce you man and wife," the vicar said. Alistair didn't wait. He turned her and kissed her. It was a kiss of relief, of claiming, of finality. "My Duchess," he murmured against her lips. "My wife." "My Duke," she replied. "My love." They signed the register. The scratch of the quill was the only sound. Isabel Navar, Duchess of Blackthorne. The signature looked strange, foreign and beautiful. Departure for the north. They didn't linger. London felt toxic, a poisonous cloud pressing in on all sides. Back at Grosvenor Square, the travelling carriage was waiting. It was a sturdy vehicle built for long journeys, piled high with trunks. Isabel hugged. Caroline goodbye on the steps. "Write to me," Caroline said. "Tell me everything, especially the parts that would make Lady Bramfield faint." "I will," Isabel promised. "Thank you for standing with me." "Go," Caroline pushed her gently. "Run away to your castle. Be happy." Alistair helped her into the carriage. He climbed in beside her and signalled. The driver. The whip cracked. The wheels clattered against the cobblestones. As the carriage lurched forward, picking up speed, Isabel leaned back against the squabs. She watched the townhouse pass by, then the square, then the streets of Mayfair. She saw the familiar landmarks of her captivity, the modista where she had been fitted for the corset, the park where she had ridden in circles, the Bramfield house standing tall and judgmental. They passed the city limits. The noise of London began to fade, replaced by the open road and the smell of wet earth. Isabel felt a physical sensation in her chest, like a tight band snapping. She took a deep breath. The air tasted different here. It tasted of space. Alistair reached out and took her hand. He pulled off his glove and hers, so it was skin against skin. "Are you afraid?" he asked, watching her face. "A little," she admitted. "I don't know who I am anymore. I was Lady Isabel, the Earl's daughter. I was the intended bride. Now you are Isabel," he said. "Just Isabel, and you are free to find out who she is." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing the gold band on her finger. "We are going to Derbyshire," he said. "It is wild there. The wind never stops. The moors are endless. It is not a polite place." Isabel looked at him. She saw the wolf who had found his mate. She saw the partner who would run beside her. "I am done with polite places," she said, leaning her head onto his shoulder. "Take me to the wild." The carriage rattled on, carrying them north, away from the ruins of their past and toward the unwritten, dangerous, beautiful future. Isabel closed her eyes, and for the first time in months she slept. Blackthorne Abbey. Blackthorne Abbey did not welcome visitors. It tolerated them. Situated in the rugged heart of the Peak District, the estate was a sprawling architectural beast of grey stone, ancient ivy, and Gothic arches that seemed to grow directly out of the granite moors. When the carriage finally rumbled up the long, winding drive, the sky was a bruised purple and the wind was howling. Across the heather like a lost soul, to a London debutante, it might have looked terrifying, a desolate fortress at the end of the world. To Isabel, it looked like heaven. "It is severe," Alistair said, watching her face closely as he helped her down from the carriage. He looked anxious, afraid that the reality of his home would finally break her. "Resolve. It is not a palace, Isabel. It is draughty. The fires smoke, and the nearest neighbour is 5 miles away." Isabel stood on the gravel, the wind immediately tearing at her hair, whipping her cloak around her legs. She took a deep breath. The air tasted of peat, rain, and ancient stone. "It is perfect," she said, turning to him with a smile that reached her eyes. "It is real." She took charge of the household with the same fierce energy she had shown at the Serpentine. She didn't try to tame the Abbey, that would have been impossible, but she brought light into it. She threw open heavy velvet curtains that had been drawn for a decade, letting the pale northern sun wash over the dusty oak floors. She filled the gloomy library with fresh flowers from the moors, wild heather and gorse. She turned the silence of the house into a home, healing the war duke. But the romance of the escape soon gave way to the reality of the recovery. Alistair had been right. He was not whole. The war he had left behind in Spain had followed him to Derbyshire, packed away in the luggage of his mind. The nightmares came frequently in those first few months. Isabel would wake in the dead of night to the sound of a strangled cry. Beside her, Alistair would be thrashing, his body soaked in cold sweat, fighting invisible enemies in the dark. "Get the men back," he would shout, his voice raw with panic. "Damn it, move! The artillery!" The first time it happened, Isabel had frozen, terrified. But she remembered the garden party. She remembered that he needed an anchor. She didn't retreat. She reached out. "Alistair!" She grabbed his shoulders, shaking him firmly. "Wake up, you are home." He bolted upright, gasping, his hand reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. His eyes were wild, seeing smoke and blood instead of the quiet sanctuary of their bedroom. "It's me," she soothed, pulling his head down to her chest, her hand tangling in his damp hair. "It's Isabel. You are at the Abbey. There is no artillery. Just the wind." He collapsed against her, shaking violently. "I lost them," he choked out, the guilt of the commander surfacing. "So many of them. I can still hear the horses screaming." "I know," she whispered, rocking him as she would a child. "I know. But you are safe now. You survived. You have to let yourself survive." It was a slow, painful exorcism. There were days when he withdrew into a brooding silence, riding the moors for hours until his horse was blown and he was exhausted enough to sleep without dreaming. There were days when the sound of a door slamming would send him into a defensive crouch. But Isabel never wavered. She rode with him. She sat with him in the silence. She learned to read the shadows in his eyes and talk him back to the light. And slowly the shadows began to recede. He began to smile more, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his harsh face. He began to take interest in the estate again, sketching plans for new tenant cottages, discussing crop yields with his steward. He began to believe that he was allowed to be happy. "You saved me," he told her one evening, 6 months after their arrival, as they sat by the roaring fire in the library. "I was drowning, Isabel. You taught me how to breathe again." "We saved each other," she corrected, looking up from her book on hydraulics. "I was suffocating in silk. You gave me air." The reconciliation. A year passed. The scandal in London had cooled, replaced by newer, fresher gossip. And then the letter arrived. It was from her mother, naturally. The Countess had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, chipping away at the Earl's pride like water on stone. "My dearest Isabel, your father is stubborn, but he is not made of stone. He misses you, though he would sooner cut off his hand than— Admit it, I have convinced him that a tour of the north is necessary for his health. We will be passing through Derbyshire next Tuesday. He has agreed to stop. Do not expect an apology, my darling, but expect a father who wishes to see his daughter." When the Hawkstone carriage arrived, Isabel stood on the steps of the Abbey, Alistair beside her. His hand gripped hers tightly. "If he insults you," Alistair murmured, "I will throw him off my land, Earl or not." "He won't," Isabel said, though her stomach was fluttering. "He just needs to see." The Earl of Hawkstone descended from the carriage. He looked older, greyer. He leaned heavily on his cane as he walked up the steps. He stopped 3 feet away, his eyes sweeping over Isabel, her wind-blown hair, her simple wool dress, the radiant health in her cheeks. "Papa," she said softly. "Isabel." He nodded formally. Then he turned his gaze to Alistair. The two men stared at each other, the aristocrat of the old world and the warrior of the new. "Your Grace," the Earl said stiffly. "Lord." "Hawkstone," Alistair replied, his voice cool but polite. "You are welcome in my home." They moved into the drawing-room for tea. The atmosphere was brittle, tension humming in the air. They discussed the roads. They discussed the weather. Finally, the Earl set down his cup. "You look well, Isabel," he said, his voice gruff. "Different. Less polished, but well." "I am happy, Papa," she said, looking at him directly. "Truly happy. For the first time in my life." The Earl looked at Alistair. "And you, sir? Do you treat her well? The rumours in London were vicious." "London knows nothing of me," Alistair said calmly. "I love your daughter, my lord. I honour her. She is the architect of my peace and the ruler of this house. I would lay down my life for her without a moment's hesitation." The Earl studied him. He saw the way Alistair's body angled toward Isabel, protective and devoted. He saw the way Isabel touched Alistair's arm, a gesture of easy intimacy. The Earl sighed, a long, deflating sound. "I was wrong," he admitted. The words clearly tasted like bile, but he said them. "I thought you were throwing your life away on a broken man. I see now that you have found a protector." He stood up and extended his hand to Alistair. "I cannot say I approve of the method, Your Grace. The scandal was regrettable, but I cannot argue with the result. You have made her happy. For that you have my gratitude." Alistair stood and took the hand. The grip was firm, the bridge was rebuilt. "Thank you, my lord," Alistair said. "That means a great deal to her." When the carriage pulled away 2 days later, Isabel cried. Not tears of grief, but of relief. The final thread of her old life had been woven into her new one. Epilogue. 5 years later, the sun was shining over the Derbyshire moors, a rare, brilliant gold that turned the heather to fire. Isabel stood at the window of the nursery, watching the garden below. "Higher, Papa! Higher!" 5-year-old Edmund Navar, the Marquis of Blackthorne, was shrieking with delight as his father lifted him high into the air. The boy had Alistair's dark hair and Isabel's fearless grin. Alistair swung the boy onto his shoulders, galloping across the grass while making horse noises, completely abandoning the dignity of a duke. "Careful, Alistair," Isabel called out, laughing. "Do not drop the air." "I have never dropped anything precious in my life," Alistair shouted back, grinning up at her. Behind Isabel, a gurgle came from the cradle. 2-year-old Margaret, named for her grandmother, was waking up. She was a round, happy baby with bright blue eyes and a tuft of chestnut curls. Isabel picked her up, settling the baby on her hip. She looked out the window again. 5 years. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had stood on the terrace at Bramfield House, terrified and trembling in a blue dress she hated. She had chosen the fire, and contrary to everyone's warnings, it hadn't burned her down. It had forged her. Alistair came into the house a moment later, breathless and dishevelled, carrying Edmund. He set the boy down, who immediately ran off to find his wooden soldiers. Alistair walked over to Isabel, wrapping his arms around her and the baby. He kissed Margaret's head, then pressed his lips to Isabel's neck. "You are smiling," he murmured against her skin. "What are you thinking?" "I was thinking about Philip," she admitted. Alistair pulled back, raising an eyebrow. "Should I be jealous? I hear he finally married that quiet girl from Somerset. They are very agricultural together." Isabel laughed. "No, I was thinking that he was right about one thing. He told me I would regret my choice. He said passion fades and I would be left with nothing." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who was her husband, her lover, and her best friend. The scars were still there, but the darkness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a steady, enduring warmth. "He was wrong," she whispered. "The passion didn't fade, Alistair. It just deepened. It became the foundation of the house." "He was a fool," Alistair said simply. "He thought you wanted a life that was easy. He didn't know you. Wanted a life that was yours." He took the baby from her, placing Margaret gently in her crib, and then turned back to his wife. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked, his voice turning serious. "The balls? The lights? The admiration of society?" "I have the admiration of the only person who matters," she said, walking into his embrace. "And as for the lights, look outside." She gestured to the window where the sun was setting over the wild, untamed hills of the Peak District. "I have the sky," she said. "I have the wind. I have my children. And I have you." Alistair kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of 5 years of mornings, of shared fears, of conquered nightmares, and of a love that had defied the world to exist. "We made it," he whispered against her lips. "We escaped the cage." "We did not just escape," Isabel said, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. "We learned to fly." Outside, the wind howled across the moors, wild and free, but inside Blackthorne Abbey the fire was warm. The walls were strong, and two hearts that had once been lonely hunters were finally perfectly at peace. The end. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this powerful love story. If you were touched by the journey of Lady Isabel and the Duke of Blackthorne, we invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share this story with others. Your support, truly from the heart, keeps us inspired to bring you more tales filled with love, redemption, and emotional turning points. And don't forget, another unforgettable story from our channel appears at the end of this video. Click and be amazed by what awaits you next. With all our gratitude,